in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order Number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04. This public body is authorized to meet electronically. This is an executive session of the committee. Please note there is no physical permission for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all the members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to listen contemporaneously by means of the Zoom platform or telephone. All necessary information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. Notice for this meeting complies with House rules and RSA 91A. Anyone who has problems accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Christina Dyer, committee researcher, will be staff assisting us. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call votes. We'll start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states his or her presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting. This is required under the right to know law. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
He's going to be late.
Okay, thank you. Representative McMahon.
Present. And no one's in the room with me at my office at home.
Representative Nelson.
Present here in Brookfield, and I am alone.
Representative Acton.
I'm here in Fremont, and I'm alone in the house.
Representative Gay.
Present.
Representative Cushman.
Present.
Representative Folsom, present. Representative Kelsey.
Present.
Representative King.
Here in the LOB.
Representative Kofalt.
I am here in my home office in Wilton. There are others in the house, no one else in the room.
Representative Weber.
Here in my home in Walpole, and I am alone at home.
Representative McKay.
Present in the LOB.
Representative Snow. Representative Snow.
Home alone in my home in Somersworth.
I haven't done Representative Cannon yet. Representative Query, who are you sitting in for today?
I'm sitting in for Representative Merchant.
Okay. Representative Knirk.
I'm here alone in my study in Freedom. My wife is in the house, but not in here. And unfortunately, I do not have my grandchild.
Representative Soloway.
Present in my home office in Lee, New Hampshire, and alone.
Representative Cannon.
I'm home alone in my home in Somersworth.
Representative Nutter Upham.
Good morning. I'm here in my living room in Nashua, New Hampshire, and my husband is elsewhere in the house.
Representative Shapiro.
Alone in my office at home in Keene.
Representative Woods.
I'm here in my study in Bow. I'm alone in my study, but my wife is elsewhere in the house.
Representative Query.
Present, I am here in Manchester, New Hampshire, and my grandparents are in the house, but not in the room.
And Representative Pearson.
Here in the LOB.
We have two absents.
Who is absent?
Marsh and Snow.
Thank you. I'm opening the executive session on Senate Bill 70 4 relative to advance directives for healthcare decisions, and the chair calls on Representative Gay for a motion.
I make the motion to retain SB 74.
Representative Gay moves to retain HB 74. Do I have a second? Representative Cushman. Representative Gay, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, I think this is a very, very important bill. It needs to pass in the current form. The wording is so loose that many, many people are interpreting it as a euthanasia bill. There's several places we can fix the wording so that it's much more clear and it retains the rights of the patient.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? I'm flying blind in terms of the screen, if you can let me know.
Okay. Representative Weber.
Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very concerned that there has been a very concerted last-minute effort on this bill, which has been worked on by many, many people. The identification of it as a euthanasia bill is simply incorrect because there's a specific statement in the bill stating that nothing in this bill authorizes that. The other concerns that I have heard with it is that it is too complicated. And of course it is complicated because end-of-life issues are always complicated for all of us. It says that it excessively loosens end-of-life decision-making rules. It does not. It allows people to make their own choices for themselves. And in the event that they have not done so, it has a framework for making sure that the nearest and dearest to them have a voice in what happens to them. Obviously, if that doesn't, if there is dissension or if there's concern about who's making the decisions, there's always a court proceeding, but that happens now. It says it inappropriately authorizes new players. Well, no, it doesn't. These are the same players that are involved in these decisions anyway. Then concerns about lacks any clear opt-out provision. Well, there's a very clear opt-out provision. You simply do your own directive and tell people exactly what you want and exactly who you want involved in the decision-making process. So I think this is a very important bill. It is a very well thought out bill. I think it is very unfortunate that people who did not come to the hearing or start any kind of opposition until over the weekend are working hard to torpedo the work that's been done already. So I am hoping that a motion of ought to pass may be brought if the retention is overturned. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Who else has a hand up?
Representative Woods. and
Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill, as you can see. I've been involved with this in many dimensions over since the 60s, basically. As a House officer, I was thrust into position on a couple of times when I worked in the intensive care unit, where there was no help in this regard, as we're looking at now. It's not a comfortable feeling. I've seen this develop. I've helped it peripherally through being a delegate to the AMA, American Medical Association, and through the New Hampshire Medical Society. This has been a very, very concerted effort. And it's not perfect. And for that reason, there's always going to be some changes. As use comes along the way, we'll find ways that will need to be changed. At this juncture, I would have absolutely no problem with retaining it. If there are some very concrete areas that can be specifically examined, and I would be very happy to be part of that group to work on it in that guise. But as been alluded to already, the myriad of people who have addressed us have been in very vague terms. And when they have addressed supposedly specific items, they clearly have not read the bill. So I would like to retain it and work on it if there are specific things to work on. And if it were retained, then I would put my shoulder to the task, and I would only retain it if we had an honest commitment to do that with specific entities in mind. Again, I have not seen that yet, but I would like to hear some even at this moment, if we could. But this has been a good bill. It's come a long way. I look at it from two perspectives, that if when we pass a piece of legislation, any piece of legislation for that matter, are we doing harm in any way by unintended consequences? Or are we doing harm by not passing it? Would we be helping more by passing it at this juncture? At this juncture, I can see that passing it would be of more benefit. But if it were retained, I could be happy with that if we have some very specific items that need to be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Soloway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak against the motion to retain. I've put deep thought into this, and I've conferenced with members of this committee on both sides and have, dare I say, agonized over it. I do not wish to contest the quality of the bill. I think that the Senate and this committee have done yeoman work in crafting the best possible bill for the moment. What I would like to speak to is the political process. And the political process is that many of us who are committed to the content of the bill do not wish to risk the bill being rejected by the full House. However, the fact of the matter is that the full House does represent the will of the people, and it's time to let the full House make its own decision about OTP or ITL or tabling this motion. And I would like to see an OTP motion come out of this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Is there anyone else? I see a hand, but I don't see a face.
Knirk.
Representative Knirk, who has both a hand and a face.
Apologies, there we are. Yep. I would like to echo what has previously been said. I have received also a number of emails, all of which demonstrated that apparently the sender had not looked at the bill. And, again, the whole issue that it allows assisted suicide. If we look on page 24, lines 23 to 25, nothing in this chapter should be construed to legalize, constitute, condone, authorize, or approve suicide, assisted suicide, mercy killing, or euthanasia. I don't know how much more clearly that can be stated. That isn't even confusing legalese. That's plain English. So I would echo what Representative Woods said. I've also heard that people have concerns about it. Well, then right now in this committee, please give some examples of where it is confusing wording, because some of the examples were brought up during the hearing and those were explained and they were quite clear and there was not a confusion. I think that anybody who wants to vote for retaining this should be able to see that, as Representative Woods just said, that there are some clear flaws. And so I would invite those who favor retaining to demonstrate those at this point in time to convince those of us who want to actually have an ought to pass motion to think about retention if we can see clear flaws that can be addressed. In absence of that, I think also, yes, we should pass to get this bill out of this committee as an ought to pass. And as Representative Salloway said, let the full House vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you,
By
Representative.
the way, I should also add the fact that the Catholic Diocese is on board with this, and they are pretty smart and they think well, and we're quite convinced that they do not support assisted suicide. And the fact that they are on board with this means that it has, I think, a good stamp of approval that it is a good, well thought out bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have anyone else who's in the meeting via Zoom who wishes to speak?
No, I don't see any hands.
Okay, I don't see anybody. Anybody in the committee room who will wish to speak? Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concern is not that this bill is a euthanasia bill, but that its intention was to clarify language and make some other provisions, but clearly from all these emails, it's not clear to other, to some of our stakeholders, that this bill would affect. Specifically, Bobby Schindler, Terry Schiavo's brother, if you remember the case of Terry Schiavo, she was a woman with a traumatic brain injury, and her nutrition and hydration was stopped by a court order against the family's wishes. He sent us an email asking us to ITL the bill, and I think his testimony, if you guys take a look at it, is pretty, profound. But my reasons, striking the language on page 6, lines 36 and 37, and page 7, lines 1 through 3, making it so that the choosing to have one's wishes overridden should you no longer have the capacity for decision making, that becomes the default. And instead of needing an explicit statement in the advance directive, I think this needs deeper consideration and tightening of the proposed language. And while I can see some situations where that could be necessary, such as in a person who has dementia who's refusing showers, there are other situations where this would be problematic, such as someone who has a traumatic brain injury or another acute injury or illness that can cause a transient state of incapacity for medical decision making. It would be difficult for them to resume the capability to decide for themselves in that scenario. Section 5, there's a measure to allow surrogates or agents consent to clinical trials for experimental treatments, not only just intended to save their life, but to, quote, reduce pain, distress, or discomfort. I think this language is very broad and opens the door to virtually any medication trial for any diagnosis a patient has, which many patients have many diagnoses. So, that could include a clinical trial for any simple things such as hyperlipidemia or heartburn to, a vaccination for a disease likely to cause discomfort, any disease, maybe one that's not even deadly. So we need to be very careful here. The form for advance directives and disclosure statement has some issues. The disclosure statement explains that the default position is your agent can consent to enroll you in clinical trials, but you may write otherwise. And the advance directive form, which is signed, leaves out language on the current form that says, I hereby acknowledge that I've been provided with a disclosure statement explaining the effects of this directive. I have read and understand the information contained in the disclosure statement. Instead, as written in SB 74, it just says, I have received the disclosure statement. So not necessarily that you read and understood it. On page 18, line 6, the advance directives are clarified by crossing out and initialing any statements one disagrees with. I think this is confusing and it doesn't lend to clarity at all. The section should have a box with a yes or no or some other clear language. I do wish, I do not wish, with the option to choose one or the other, like the present form. there are a couple of others, and I don't mind going through, but just as a start, that's where some of the problematic language is. I do have a few more if anyone wants me to continue.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else in the room wish to? Yes, Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a point of clarification that Representative Weber made reference to. Is this wasn't something that just came together over the weekend. It was actually first presented to us at the last committee meeting by Representative Leyen, and in her testimony, she lists several. I think there's like 9 or 10 things that she saw wrong with the bill as it is currently reads, and then at the end, when we made a request on whether we wanted to actually look into this, Representative Gay had brought up that she wanted to put some language together. And then over the last 2 weeks, there's been some research and further looking into this bill. So it's hard to actually say that nobody's actually read through this. I think there's been a lot of work put into some of this, and also some of our discussions with Representative Leon. In her testimony, she says that she wanted to kill this bill, and we have actually gotten her to a point where she would support a retaining if that's what the committee feels. So I believe that I think retaining is definitely a good option at this point. I think all of us feel that this is a good bill, and that we just need to look at some of the further language. And I do appreciate all the work that's been put into it up to this point. It's just, I think that a little bit more needs to be put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wish to speak? Then a few things from me. As the chairman, 3 reasons I would support retention. I still do see confusion in this language. And I have given copies of this bill to numbers of friends who are quite intelligent. And about half of them have said, I don't see any confusion. And the other half of them say, I see numbers of places with confusion. Secondly, page 23, lines 30 and following, an agent or surrogate may revoke a do not resuscitate or post order for a principal who lacks capacity to make healthcare decisions. There are numbers of people who wish to deny that maybe the person was of clear mind when he or she wrote that, but is not that now. But the orders were written, or the desire was made known, when the person was of capacity to make a healthcare decision. And therefore, numbers of us believe that the surrogate should not have the right to overrule that. And then thirdly, I've come to these conclusions before the barrage of weekend emails. I've read some of them, and I don't agree with a number of them. I agree with their conclusions, but I do not agree with the reasoning that got some of them there. I see the statement about euthanasia as clear as it possibly can be. So people who say that it is the slippery slope to euthanasia, I don't see that at all. The final reason is I've been talking with numbers of people in my party recently. I learned, not surprisingly, that the Freedom Republicans want to stress the rights of the individual for self-determination, and for reasons I just gave, do not see that self-determination as clear as it is in the laws of some states. But if it were just the Freedom Republicans, I can do a nose count in voting. The bill would probably pass. But what I have seen is numbers of others who would not really wish to identify with the Freedom Caucus at all on most things, or many things, also have come to the same conclusion. And if the bill goes to the House floor and is defeated, it won't come back next year. And there's a number of things in this bill that are good and an improvement, and I wouldn't want to see that. And so rather than just passing it as is with the problems I see, or defeating it, which I would not wish, I think the motion to retain is the one that I'm supporting. For me, retaining a bill, and there's really no pun intended on this, is not death with dignity. Motion to retain for me, and knowing this committee, is let's really work on it. Let's polish it until it shines, which is kind of like what we've been doing all year so far. And I would very much want to put on such a retains committee, people who generally favor the bill, but want to remove the roadblocks that some of us face. So for that reason, I would move to retain. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Yes.
Seeing none?
Dennis?
Well, no, Dennis Acton has his hand up.
I didn't see that. Thank you. No one told me. Dennis, Representative.
I do too, but he was first.
Dennis Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the chance to speak here. I've said many times, my wife is my eyes and ears on the ground for medical issues. She's out there every day as a home care physical therapist, helping people make these tough decisions of transitioning from fighting a terrible disease to hospice. And she sees these problems daily, and it rips families apart, and it's
Representative Acton, the people in the room really can't hear you.
okay. Hang on a second here. All right, I can speak up a little bit louder here. Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I have a different microphone. Just to recap, my wife, as you all know, is my eyes and ears as a home care physical therapist. She deals with the problems that we're trying to address here every single day, and it's the time has come to address these problems. We have to fix it now. The amount of people that have gone in organizations and so forth that have had input into this is impressive, and we've gotten to this point where we have a piece of legislation. Yes, it's not perfect. Like very few pieces of legislation we ever deal with this complex are going to be perfect. But what I see now is, and certainly, Mr. Chairman, I understand your pledge of doing a real study on this if the time comes. But I just believe I resent that this was turned into a ideological choice of euthanasia, and it seems as though this is just being killed. An attempt is being made to kill this on ideological bounds when this is a problem that needs to be solved. We need to get on with it. Retaining is just going to put it off for another till next year, and I just don't see that's the smart move. I think we should move to the floor. And if there needs to be amendments on the floor to address these individual issues, which wouldn't be unprecedented, then let's do it. But let's make the move. Let's take the immense amount of work being done from across the entire industry, really, of medical care, and let's make this happen. And if there's issues that pop up, then we can fix it next year with legislation. But I've had it with retaining things. Let's get proactive here. Let's move this to the House. We can fight it out there no matter what happens and take it from there. That's my belief. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. My response to one of your comments is I certainly do not see this as ideological. I see this as a matter of clarity, nor did I hear any of the my colleagues in the room speak that this is a slippery slope. I think we're all agreed that euthanasia terms, irrespective of what emails came in over the weekend, the euthanasia issue is very clear. And again, it's a matter of clarity, but thank you for your testimony. Anyone else? Representative Nikki Kelsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Your sign is facing people who can't read it. Thank you.
Back to what Representative Cushman said with the advanced directive and disclosure. If you look at the current advanced directive form, there is a section for additional instructions, which is large and mentions instructions about refusing any specific types of treatment that are inconsistent with your religious beliefs or are unacceptable to you for any other reason. This section, however, does not exist on the form if SB 74 passes as currently written. And then on page 25, line 6, it strikes the ability for a patient's common law spouse as defined by RSA 45739 to be deemed the patient's surrogate. I don't have all the answers to these issues, but despite the stakeholders spending so much time on this and then they are meaning well, there are some problems with this bill. I feel like truly, I like this bill, but I feel like that we need to fix the issues now. So, and not pass something that can die on the floor, because then it can't come back. So this is why I would be in favor of retaining this.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gay.
Yes, I didn't want to speak at length when I first spoke, so I wanted to add, there are several specific things that need to be fixed. And I don't think waiting till we can vote again, not in June, but the next time, I don't think for something that's been decades in the making is a bad investment of time. We want this bill to pass as soon as possible. It gets killed on the floor, we lose it for 2 years and start over. So I will say some more specifics. It's not all of them, but it's a couple of specifics. And one is removing in several places the role of the family has been put lower than the role of the doctors or PAs or nurse practitioners. The family has been left much lower in having authority to determine what the patient wants, and also well, I forgot the other thing, but I mean, that's pretty critical that the family is less important. Oh, I know. The other thing is that family is more likely to know if a person's in a clear mind. You know, we know that people can be temporarily not clear from a medication, what that will wear off, or they can do sundowning where they're clear in the morning, and as the day gets in the evening, that's not the time to ask them something important. I've buried both of my patients and both of my parents, my husband's parents. So, and as I get older, I'm very concerned about these patient rights. I think we have to go over it with fine-tooth comb and correct some wording that's not badly intentioned, except I do think when you say family is not near as important as a surrogate, I do think that's needs to change. But I really think the changes are not really policy. I think they are inadvertent to remove authority from the patient, the principal, and their families. So it's, you know, I don't think it's fair to say this is prejudice. I think we are all concerned about specifics that need to be addressed and clarified. And that is done much better in work sessions rather than an amendment here and there. A lot of people in this committee were on the committee that came up with this bill. Most of us were not. Or we could have said this, you know, months ago. So we wouldn't be coming after the fact and saying, but wait a minute, we need to fix this. So I beg you, let's fix it. It needs to pass. We need to make it clear. If very intelligent people can read this and say, this doesn't, I don't know what they're saying here. I have a real problem with the form. I think whenever you sign something, you ought to be signing what you're intending. And if somebody says, oh, it can't be more than a page or two, that's a bunch of baloney. Buy a house, you don't sign 1 or 2 pages. Everything, all the policy needs to be in the document that you sign. And maybe that'll mean some of the legalese that repeats and repeats and repeats, maybe that can be clarified. But when you sign something, you should not have to be referring to another page, another paragraph to see what you're signing. So I want this bill to pass. I just want it to be in good, usable, understandable form. I am not slamming anybody who worked on building this. I know you put blood, sweat, and tears and many hours into it.
Thank you, Representative. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Do you see any hands, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Knirk.
Representative Knirk.
Thank you. A couple of things to keep in mind. One is that when you talk about the forms, the language that is in the statute says components shall be substantially substantially the following form. That means that it is not going to have to be absolutely verbatim what is in the bill. So issues if it's clearer with a checkbox rather than a cross out an initial, that can be done. This is not something where it has to be precisely this. So those concerns can be addressed after this bill is passed, but nothing can be done if the bill isn't passed. Likewise, the comments, I was going to respond, but I couldn't keep track of everything. Some of the issues that I think are confusing to people, I would like Representative Gay to clarify where the family is placed below the practitioner. The practitioner, I think that may be in these places where it refers to who writes the orders. And that's because a family can't go in and write an order. Only the practitioner can. But the family or whoever is the designated surrogate is the one who tells the physician or the practitioner what to write. Only the practitioner, and that came up in the hearing. It came up in the hearing about why was that language there. It has to do with who can actually write an order in a chart. So that's important. Likewise, the issue about incompetence, we frequently are dealing with people. Just think about your standard person intubated in the ICU after a few days. Most of them are not particularly able to make good decisions at that point. They often become psychotic, and they may want to try to pull their tube out. Should we just let them pull their tube out when they're from having perfectly reversible disease? That's what they want to do right then. But no, we sedate them to keep them safe so they don't pull their tube out, so they can recover and then eventually turn back into the same viable person they were before they got that transient illness. So we're not talking about, when we say we not respect their wish at that point to yank their tube out, it's because it's for their safety. Obviously, this goes into much more the longer term issues. The issue too about Terry Schiavo's brother, I wonder whether he read this bill. Indeed, there would not have been a court order if they had an advance directive. I think it went to the court because there was not an advance directive to clarify what the treatment should be. To prevent the problem with Terry Schiavo is exactly why we have this. And this bill would have clarified with certainty that if there were not an advance directive, who the surrogate would be. And that surrogate would have been the family. It gives that order, that sequence in the bill here about who takes first, second, and third, and if they are capable, if they're not capable, or they're deceased or whatever, you go to the next one. The family would have been in charge. Their problem would not have occurred had this bill, for example, been in effect when she had her problem. So I still do not think, I guess I would go back and ask, could Representative Gay please identify where it is that the family is placed below the practitioner by page and line so we can actually look at it rather than just making the statement without the backup? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gay?
Yes, I will attempt to do that. I have a few places marked, and I don't know how great a job I'm going to do explaining them. Let's see. Page 23, line 16 and 17, about the role of the family, requesting to transfer care if a provider has a moral objection to a DNR, or we should be talking to a post. Or won't issue a post. Page 25, lines 27 through 30.
Could I request the chapter number? Because I'm reading it online and it doesn't give the page numbers. It just gives the Roman numerals.
Okay, this is, I'm not quite sure where the Roman numeral 2 is late, and it's on page 25 or 26, so I'm not quite sure what.
Almost at the very end.
Yeah, it's under 137J35, surrogate.
Section 12, section 12.
Thank you.
Well, when it says Roman numeral 2, but it's right above 13. So I guess, okay. Yeah, I don't see 12, but anyway, the surrogate decision maker is identified by the attending practitioner, may make healthcare decisions for the patients in accordance with RSA 137J6. The surrogacy provisions of this chapter shall take effect when the decision maker names are recorded in the medical record. So you always have to get this put in the medical record. And the attending practitioner believes, after reasonable inquiry, that neither a healthcare agent under a durable power of attorney for healthcare or a surrogate of higher priority is available or able and willing to act. So I left out a line. They can change that person's, the surrogate or the durable power of attorney if they think they're not willing to act, which could mean they're not deciding on my way.
Representative Kennard, go ahead.
Yeah, that is not what it says. It doesn't say that they're not, by willing to act means that you can find them. It says only after reasonable inquiry that neither a healthcare agent or durable power of attorney, because if those two exist, the surrogate does not take effect, or a surrogate of higher priority. In other words, you don't take the third cousin and follow what they say if the mother happens to be available. And you know that if you are aware that the mother is available and is willing to make that decision, they are the higher in that list than the third cousin, and therefore they will be the one the person relies upon. And it does have a burden of reasonable inquiry. You don't just make a willy-nilly decision. The practitioner has to do a reasonable inquiry to find out, is there a healthcare agent? Is there a durable power of attorney? Is there a surrogate of higher priority who is available? Available means, for example, they're still alive. You can find them. They're not in some remote island. It has never been heard from for 20 years. The mother may be alive, but not available. Therefore, they're unable or unwilling to act because they're not available. And also there are some people who may choose, they may just say, look, I can't make this decision. I'd like to have my, I'm speaking, they may be the next in line in surrogacy, but they don't feel comfortable making the decision because they don't feel like they know what the right decision is. And therefore they are not willing to do that. And they would pass it to, for example, a child or a brother or somebody else who they think would be more competent to do so. That is what that means. It doesn't mean the practitioner has the right to pick who they have. In fact, it takes away their right to just pick and declares who they must rely upon, and that is according to the order of surrogacy as in the bill.
Well, another really critical spot is that only medical personnel are named in here to determine whether a person is a clear mind. Depends on who that practitioner is. The last time I was in the hospital, I was shocked that I wasn't going to see my own doctor. I was going to see the hospitalist. Now, maybe if we're talking about a person in an assisted living or a person in a nursing home whom the hospitalist, they know the hospitalist, because that's who takes care of them all the time. That's one situation. But it's only medical personnel who are listed in here to determine if somebody's a qualified patient. There is no reference to any other kind of person, which it could be the family and it could be their religious leader. It's just, this is written very clearly from the medical care people's point of view. It needs to be added the family's point of view. And it's not, I'm not inferring that there was a deliberate attempt to exclude the family. It's accidental, it's an overload. The family needs to be written in here. Oh, there's another real simple, basic thing. The list of potential surrogates doesn't list a common law wife or spouse. In a million other places, common law does have authority, but not here. There are many, many points like this, and I think they deserve to be discussed and clarified. You might be able to say, wait a minute, you're not looking at this right. This is, we wrote this and it is clear. See, this is what it means. But I think there are just too many, and this is not, I wasn't going to say death with dignity, because a lot of times we retain bills and we don't want to hurt the people's feelings who issued the bill. We don't want to make them feel bad. Oh, we'll just study it later and then just drop off into nowhere. This is critical. This needs to pass. We need to put it in good form and not hope that we can come back and clarify things or address issues. I think it needs to be retained because it is important. And this way, a lot more people can have input.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I have been informed of over the course of this discussion, and I'm sorry I don't have a site, is that currently there is legislative authorization for life-saving clinical trials, which expires in July. That was temporary emergency legislation. And if we do not pass this bill, then that authorization for people to consent to that life-saving trial vanishes at that point. So that's another concern for getting things done sooner rather than later. And I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention.
Thank you, Representative. Before we continue with any discussion, the chair wishes to acknowledge Representative Snow is in the room.
Thank you.
And do you wish to speak?
I just have a question. I'm interested in Representative Kelsey's suggestion that common law wives and perhaps common law husbands are sort of excluded from that. But how do we define common law? My understanding is a common law wife is somebody who's lived continuously with the same person for over 10 years. But does that mean that anybody that was less? I'm wondering if it actually excludes common law wives. Does it actually say they can't be named?
It does not say wives, it says spouse. And on page 25, line 6, it reads the parent spouse or civil union partner is the :1 priority in the decision-making order. It strikes the word or common law spouse as defined by RSA 457:39. It strikes common law spouse.
So would that satisfy your concern about that phrase?
I think Representative Snow, I think that was Representative Gay that brought up the common law.
Okay.
Well, that would address one issue.
But it
Another
defines
list. I have a list of issues.
No, I do
but
understand
that
that.
would,
I'm only
yes.
asking the question about that one issue. It
Yes.
does seem that that's now covered.
Well, it's covered under the heading of civil union partner if they have done that. If they is, I'm not clear as to whether a civil union partner is the new term for common law spouse. It is not. Then common law spouse seems to be stricken now, according to this bill.
But what does that mean, civil union? Is there a procedure for that? I thought that you just chose to live together. And that's a common thing nowadays, that people don't get married, but agree to live together. And I thought that's what that meant.
Representative Kelsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a civil union is actually it's a marriage. I mean, it's a legal. You know, you would have it's a ceremony. But common law is just essentially people that they're living together that choose not to get married, and then it's defined by that 10-year mark. So then they would have the same rights as anybody that was married.
So do we need to look at a way of expanding that definition?
Well, this is.
Haven't gone through the actual, is that what you're saying? That we should expand that to include people who choose to live together, and we have to put it, I mean, right now, the old definition was common law meant you live together for 10 years or longer. That seems like a pretty high bar.
Yeah, 10 years nowadays is a high bar.
10 days is a high bar.
Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The RSA that's referenced in the bill, where common law spouse is defined, says that it is considered persons cohabiting and acknowledging each other as husband and wife, and generally reputed to be as such for the period of 3 years and until the decease of one of them, that they shall thereafter be deemed to have been legally married.
So Representative Snow, that is stricken now in this bill. And so this is why some of us would argue for retention.
That no longer applies?
True.
It's correct, stricken out on line, page 25, line 6. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Representative Knurk.
if I could just circle back, one thing which it took me a moment to find the reference in statute so that I could be certain about this. But the conversation we just had a moment ago about page 25, lines 19 to 27, and even further on, where we talk about this surrogacy and relying upon which surrogate and reasonable inquiry, all of that language is currently in statute. It's not being added. So concerns about whether this is something that should be there are not an issue because it's already there. The reason it's being changed, you may recall that in numerous spots through this bill, instead of saying the physician, PA, or APRN, that was always stricken and changed to the bold language, which is attending practitioner, because that is, or just practitioner, because that is now the phrase that was chosen to be used in this. And the reason for that is, again, to give a flexibility in case there's some change in how we define who has the ability to be the practitioner. And that attending practitioner is defined early in the bill. But throughout, the only thing changed here, and then there is the bold that says in accordance to RSA 137J6, which is the one that says you have to honor the preferences of the patient or of the principal that were explained to you or expressed to you before. So all that discussion we just had about changing this is actually moot because it's not being changed. It's already there. And this is what continues to bother me when I see people, so I gave it to someone to read. Well, unless they read it and referred back to each statute that's being referred to read the statute and see what's there, they will be confused. And there's an art to reading through bills and understanding the references. And I had multiple red marks when I read this for myself. And then I found it later in the bill. I said, aha, it's defined. I don't have to worry about that, and could cross it off. So I would still say that I think the language is clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Snow.
One other, I noticed on page 25, line 15, there's a new term in there that I hadn't seen before, which is a close friend of the patient. Now, I can't imagine a closer friend but somebody you decide to live with and share a life with. And would this not also cover gay couples who share a life together which, and that relationship isn't as clearly defined, but at least I think you'd have to consider if two individuals of the same sex were living together, they would be considered close friends. So it seems to me they still could be considered as a possible surrogate.
It would be Representative Snow in my reading of it, except on line 5, there is an order of priority. And so a close friend of the patient is priority H in the priority order, not priority A as the equivalent to a spouse or civil union partner. So that person living together as common law spouse would come in under friend, but way down the list after relatives. So if that's what you want, that's what you've got. But if you wish to see common law spouse as being of equal priority as actual spouse or civil union partner, you would want to take the strikeout in line 6 out. But as it stands now, that person would be way down the list. Representative Folsom?
I basically was going to speak to the same exact point, Chairman, and that in being, unfortunately, I know too many people who are not happy about their family members living with someone either of the same or opposite sex and would find this as a great opportunity to cut them out of the process.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else?
We have some people on there.
I don't.
Oh, sorry. Can you raise your hands again? Representative Weber and then Nelson.
Representative Nelson.
I'm just curious what happens when there's a divorce. Somebody's divorced and dies the next day. Who makes the decision?
Line 7 says unless there is a divorce proceeding, separation agreement or restraining order, that would nullify what says before patient spouse.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the common law spouse issue, currently, our law defines a common law spouse as somebody who has been with the person until they die. So they're not the common law spouse until after they're dead. So currently, the law treats a common law spouse as a friend. They don't have any priority now. So they're not in a worse position by us passing this. And of course, the way you fix that problem is you have an advance directive and you appoint that person as the person to make the decisions for you. We are actually protecting that person more with this than they are protected now. So that's just my take on that one. But I certainly hope that we advance the bill. But
thank you, Representative. Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I'm wrong, but the way I read it is that it's pretty clear, and it just says persons cohabitating and acknowledging each other as husband and wife and generally reputed to be as such for the period of 3 years and until the decease of one of them shall thereafter. So
But
Representative Snow.
wouldn't some priority be given? I mean, we're asking the person who this affects, the person nearing the end of their life, to make some choices. And it seems to me who they pick, if it's a close friend or someone like that, they would then be prioritized over any of the other people involved, would they not? That's they've stated in writing and said that this is the person they want to be declared first. And wouldn't that take priority over anyone else in this list? I think this just applies. No one is particularly clearly named. How do you then go down the list? You give a brother priority over a common law wife. But if the person themselves name who they want to do it, that would seem to be the main priority. And there is a place in this bill for them to do that.
Representative Folsom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think that if the person has filled out the post, that's the perfect time for them to put that friend's name down, because I believe sometimes your friends know better than sometimes your family does. But this has to do with picking a surrogate when there is no post. And that's where the concern comes in.
Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on this subject, I think it was Representative Knark who was like, oh, you know, we need to get this through so that we have this order, but that's already in statute. The only thing they changed about the order of picking the surrogate is removing the common law spouse. So there already is, you know, this kind of hierarchy of who, you know, is first chosen as the surrogate when there's no advance directive. But this still just doesn't address, you know, a lot of my concerns still haven't been addressed about, you know, in section, sorry. And on page 18, this is like another one that I didn't get to before, but lines 11 through 15, the issue applies to the term burden. The term burden is used, but there's no definition. And that's a subjective term. So they're saying, you know, stop my treatment or my tube feeding or this when I become so much of a burden. And I think that the principal's idea of a burden and agents could be different, and it needs to be really clear, and they need to offer on the form a way for them to make it very clear exactly what the parameters are for that burden and that decision for that.
Thank you, Representative Knark.
Yes, it doesn't say the patient being a burden. It says the burden of treatment. So what we're speaking of here is if, that's again, page 18, line 12. The burden of treatment may be that it's simply something which is not likely to give them any help and will cause them a great deal of pain or discomfort. And we all know that people make their own individual decisions about, for example, how far they want to go with chemotherapy treatment. And when they have almost no chance of improvement with their fourth round and they're going to be terribly sick, they may choose not to take that burden of treatment. But we're not speaking about the person being a burden. We're speaking of the burden of treatment. So they put risks and burdens, because the risk may be small, but the burden, as in the negative aspect to their quality of life, could still be high. And that is why that person may choose to not have the excessively burdensome treatments.
Thank you, Representative. Is there anyone else?
Jim Kofalt.
Representative Kofalt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would assert that the fact that we are disagreeing right now on so many of the points in this bill is precisely the reason why it should be retained. Not ITL'd, nor OTP'd, but there are a number of open questions that have come up during this conversation, and retaining the bill, I believe, is the most appropriate next step to see that whatever remaining concerns or disagreements or lack of clarity is resolved so that this bill can move forward at some point after those questions have been answered. But the fact that we're questioning so much and disagreeing on so much, this is a relatively long bill. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there to question. There's a lot there to understand. And my concern is that if we're having this discussion in which we're disagreeing on so much of what the bill says and what it means, that to me is a clear case for retaining the bill.
Thank you, Representative.
Cushman.
Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of final thoughts. So we're having the discussion of the proper process to deal with this, understanding that some legislation that was put in place will expire. it's likely that, as we've seen, the governor has dealt with things unilaterally, that especially in the medical field. And I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be poised to issue a new emergency order about something like this. The other thing is, we need to, this is not something that should be rushed with a floor amendment. The next time we go meet in the House could be, it's in the next month. So I think that this needs a little more close examination, open discussion, and work groups to get it hammered out to what it needs to be, and that a floor amendment to fix these issues that we're seeing would be too rushed. And I think we need to put it through a proper process of work groups to fix it.
Thank you, Representative. We have two very long bills following this one. So unless you have something new to say, I would suggest we move to the vote. However, you do have the right to speak.
Dennis.
Dennis?
Are there any new hands up as opposed to leftover hands?
Representative Acton.
What?
Representative Acton.
Representative Acton.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make this really quick. Earlier, I had no intention of saying that this bill was being classified as euthanasia from within this committee. As always, we've had a reasoned discussion. I agree with both sides. I think a lot of the issues we have here are misunderstandings due to the complexity of the bill, and that's why I believe that we should move forward and vote against retaining and carry on from there. Thank you.
Anyone else? The motion before us is the motion to retain, made by Representative Gay and seconded by Representative Cushman. If you choose to retain, your vote is yes. If you do not wish to retain, your vote will be no. The clerk may call the roll.
Thank you. And just a comment for Representative Query, I will add you to second to the last in the vote. Representative Marsh is absent. Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Acton.
No.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
Yes.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Kofalt.
Yes.
Representative Weber.
No.
Representative McKay.
No.
Representative Snow.
No.
Representative Knirk.
No.
Representative Soloway.
No.
Representative Cannon.
No.
Representative Nutter Upham.
No.
Representative Shapiro.
No.
Representative Woods.
No.
Representative Query.
No.
Representative Pearson.
Yes.
10-10. No.
Oh, it's not.
No, fails.
No. It's 10-11. The motion fails.
11-9.
Right.
Sorry.
I have another motion, Mr. Chairman.
You have another motion. Please hold off on that for just a second. He's got a little item he's got to attend to here. So the motion to retain has failed, and now we will entertain another motion, and the chair calls on Representative Weber.
I move on to pass.
Representative Weber moves ought to pass,
I would like to second, Mr. Chairman.
and that was Representative Soloway. I really don't expect there to be much discussion, at least I hope not.
No.
I need not speak to my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
To your motion.
She said she doesn't need to.
Representative Weber, you may speak to your motion.
No, sir, I said I did not need to speak to my motion. I think
You may not
that
speak to
the
your motion as you
point
wish.
has been made.
Thank you very much. question of Representative Weber as a parliamentarian. Representative Marsh has just entered the room. The motion is on the floor. Is he eligible to vote?
The question has not yet been put by the chair, so Representative Marsh is available to vote.
Which is my thought, but I wanted expert opinion. Thank you very much. Now the question before us on Senate Bill 74 is the motion of ought to pass as made by Representative Weber and seconded by Representative Soloway. The clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Marsh,
Votes yes.
Representative McMahon,
Yes.
Representative Nelson,
Yes.
Representative Acton,
Yes.
Representative Gay,
No.
Representative Cushman,
No.
Representative Folsom,
You have to tell us.
yes, I know. I was having a hard time with that answer. Representative Kelsey,
No.
Representative King,
No.
Representative Kofalt,
No.
Representative Weber,
Yes.
Representative McKay,
Yes.
Representative Snow,
Yes.
Representative Knirk,
Yes.
Representative Soloway,
Yes.
Representative Cannon,
Yes.
Representative Nutter Upham,
Yes.
Representative Shapiro,
Yes.
Representative Woods,
Yes.
Representative Merchant. I'm sorry, Query,
Query.
sorry,
Yes.
and Representative Pearson.
Yes.
17-4.
Are you sure?
I
The 4 noes, Gay, Cushman, 5, sorry.
I believe it's
16 to 5. You're
Okay.
right, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It passes
I have
16 to 5. Before we go on to the next bill, thank you for those who responded to my email about your preferences on retained bills, and a couple of you who had previously emailed me and whose email I lost. So I currently have responses from Representatives Woods, Soloway, Shapiro, Cushman, Merchant, Marsh, McKay, Snow, Knirk, Folsom, Cannon, and Nutter Upham. Others, I would ask you to please get in touch with me as soon as you can, because I would like to name groups to work on these bills. So at the call of whoever is the chair of that, you can get started. Second item, we passed 20-1 out of this committee, Bill number 350, an act permitting qualified patients and designated caregivers to cultivate cannabis for therapeutic use. And according to yesterday's New Hampshire Sunday News, Kevin Landrigan's column, that bill was killed 15-9 in the Senate, which he entitles Pot Reform Goes Poof. So I'm surprised at that, but if you didn't know, I wanted you to get the update on that.
The blurbs.
Representative Marsh, would you write the board on this, please? Thank you so
And
much.
the minority.
I will leave to the minority people to decide amongst themselves who will do that. And just let me know, but don't play rock, scissors, paper out in the hall. Thank you. Okay. What's next here? That ends the exec session on Senate Bill.
Sir, may I ask a question? The usual procedure is that the person who makes the motion is the one who writes the blurb unless they wish not to do so. Should that not be offered to Weber first?
It's entirely up ultimately, I think it's up to the chairman, and I certainly
Okay.
would be glad to defer to Representative Marsh.
Okay, yes.
And if
Thank you.
he needs any assistance, I'd be glad to offer it, but I leave it in his competent hands.
Thank you, everyone. Now to open the hearing, the executive session on Senate Bill 149. And just to make sure that we've got all of our papers that we need to have, there is at least one amendment. This is not to move anything, it's just to make sure we've got everything in hand. I have amendments 1295H from Merchant and Marsh. Are there other amendments on this bill? To anyone's knowledge that anyone made? Do we have 1490 from you, Madam Clerk? Or is that on another bill?
That's on 162.
That's on 162. Okay, so the only amendment we have is 1295, Representative Marsh.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we adopt Amendment 12958.
Actually, I have to rule you out of order because I think we have to move the bill first.
Fine, I'll move the bill first and then move that we adopt amendment.
Well, okay, we'll accept the first half and call on you in a minute on the second half.
Don't we do?
We do actually normally start with the amendments, don't we?
Even before we move the bill?
Well, yeah, because if there are amendments, on the House floor, we do the bill first and then the amendments, but generally in committee, we do the amendments first and then the bill. But whatever way you'd care to proceed, Mr. Chairman, at this point, we'll all take a deep breath and follow along.
The chair calls on Representative Marsh to move his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt Amendment 12958 to Senate Bill 149, and I'll be glad to speak to my notes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who's that? Representative Weber, yes. All right.
Amendment 1295H removes two sections from the bill that we believe are redundant and unnecessary because the Board of Pharmacy already has the authority to do what those two sections call.
Okay. Any discussion? Now, Madam Parliamentarian, do we now vote on the amendment and then vote on the bill?
That's right.
Okay, so we have moved by Representative Marsh and seconded by Representative Weber, Amendment 2021-1295H on Senate Bill 149 FM, removing replacing a section, replacing Part 2 with what you see before you. Any further discussion before we move on? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on the amendment?
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
Votes yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Acton.
Yes.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
Yes.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Kofalt.
Yes.
Representative Weber.
Yes.
Representative McKay.
Yes.
Representative Snow.
Yes.
Representative Knirk.
Yes, my apologies.
Sorry. Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Representative Cannon. Representative Cannon. I think she doesn't have her speaker on. I'll come back to her. Representative Nutter Upham.
Yes.
Representative Shapiro,
Yes.
Representative Woods,
Yes.
Representative Query,
Yes.
Representative Pearson,
Yes.
and we'll come back, Representative Cameron.
Do you see a picture? on the
I see a
screen?
picture, she's not responding.
Okay, then time's
Okay.
up and
Wait, tell her to wait.
No,
It appears to be frozen. She may be having
she's frozen.
hardware.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's, I think she's frozen.
it is unanimous. And if Representative Cannon, I think, wants to add a name to the list later, I'd accept that.
Okay.
So we have 20-0.
I don't think you can do that. I don't think she's present for
Okay.
voting purposes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay.
But I don't think it's going to change the result at this point.
At
We'll
all.
try and get hold of her.
Now, I'll entertain another motion to the bill, a motion to the bill itself.
Chairman,
Representative Marsh.
I move that Senate Bill 149 ought to pass as amended.
Marsh moves as amended, and who is seconding?
Representative Weber.
Representative Marsh, you may speak to your motion.
Yes, this bill does three things. It clarifies Medicaid spend down requirements. It allows the pharmacy to adopt automated pharmacy systems at long-term care facilities and hospices, which would save a significant amount of money. And it holds healthcare facilities harmless if they acted in accordance with the applicable emergency orders during the COVID pandemic. I believe all those provisions are excellent ones. This has clearly been supported by the Senate, and we ought to concur. So that's why I move on.
This is the chair speaking. I noticed, maybe this is overly fussy, but on page 2, line 35, which is the beginning of part 3, is the term COVID-19. And while COVID-19 may eventually go away, COVID-24 may show up or something similar. And so I was wondering if it would be wise to have a floor amendment that would say COVID-19 or an equivalent pandemic or some wording. And I'm just looking to the committee to see what you think about that.
Mr. Chair, if I can speak to that.
You may.
I think that this is a very narrowly fashioned section to deal with what we specifically had to deal with during the recent year, where we had to make decisions on short notice with limited information, and we were all doing the best we can. And I think to broaden the scope of that section of the law would not be appropriate in the long term. And if a COVID-24 should come up, then the legislature at the time can deal with it.
My only question about that is, here we are arguably 15 months into the pandemic, and we're now adopting this language. Wouldn't it be good to have language like this on the books in month 1 of the next pandemic?
That would be arguable, and you could file a bill like that in September.
All righty. That's actually what I have in my notes. Any other discussion? Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I went back and forth on this bill, specifically over this section, being a registered nurse and understanding that medical facilities were kind of under the hammer of emergency orders and, had to comply, but the medical ethics, that's a pretty strong argument against this. I think that taking away some responsibility for caring for patients and making the right decisions for patients that don't harm them by giving them blanket immunity for just going along with emergency orders is just bad practice. I think that every medical professional is responsible for every decision that they make. And this would just quiet any resistance, any legitimate resistance by medical professionals to an emergency order because they know that they're not liable, so that takes away a little incentive to fight against it. I just think that, you know, if it's determined that they acted in good faith and, you know, it should be determined on a case-by-case business basis in a court of law. If a family has a reason to believe that some decision that these medical facilities made was responsible for some harm that came to their family members, they have a right to bring that to court and have it determined by a judge. And that giving blanket immunity is not the way to go about this. And we shouldn't just be like giving them a free cover your butt for, you know, decisions that potentially could have been harmful, whether there was an emergency order in place or not.
Yeah.
Representative Marsh.
Yes, thank you. This section of the bill was drafted by a broad-based group of stakeholders, including the Trial Lawyers Association. I find it rather hard to believe that I would be finding myself in agreement with the Trial Lawyers Association, but I think they were very careful to make sure that they did not compromise the rights of individuals who may have actually suffered malpractice or some other event at the hands of medical professionals, except for the fact that medical knowledge may have changed, and it may have changed dramatically over the last year. So I think, considering the number of people whose input has gone into the section, it's very appropriate. But I'm afraid I would not apply that to a broader scope, as the chairman may have suggested, at least not without going back to the stakeholders and discussing it further.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else with a hand up?
Representative Acton.
Representative Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Normally, I'm not a big fan of omnibus bills, but seeing the situation we've been in with COVID, we really had no choice. So I'd like to thank DHHS for not sneaking in any poison pills or any funny business here that allows us to pass a clean bill. The only issue I had was that we started building an omnibus amendment where we started putting all any issues into one big amendment, and that takes away our ability to individually address the amendment. So I hope in the future we can move away from both practices. But and then finally, the one issue I had is that once again with therapeutic cannabis, these were department requested changes, certainly very reasonable, and I have a problem with the continued practice of treating patients and ATCs and people involved in the program like we're going to go out and if we're not constrained by specific regulatory burdens, we're going to go out and just commit crimes left and right. There's a major felony for diversion from the program. The need to keep these tight production controls on the ATCs didn't really make sense to me because ATCs are highly regulated. They would lose everything if there was any diversion from their level. So ultimately, making such an issue about the constraints on their production, I think unfairly casts an aspersion on them in a sense where we feel that we have to control them or else they're going to be selling it out the back door to the black market. And there's no evidence of that at all. So I hope we don't do that.
I think we're on the wrong bill. That's on 162.
Representative.
We're on 149.
I am not calling on anyone. Representative, I think you're speaking to the next bill and not the present one.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry about that.
Okay, we'll remember what you said, though.
All right, and I won't repeat it then. You guys know what I'm feeling here. Sorry about that.
Okay, Representative Snow.
I have a question. I hope it's a very simple answer for. I was a sponsor of a bill to upgrade the threshold for implementation of Medicaid in and out. And there was some change that was included in this around the funding, and I hope it didn't impact the idea that bill, which was passed in the last session signed by the governor, due to be implemented as of June 30th of this year. But nothing happened. There was some clarity about whether money was going to be in the budget or not in the budget, and it's going to have to be paid for out of some other fund. It doesn't have to be paid. Is there anything about a change that is incorporated in this bill? I was told that it doesn't impact the implementation of that bill, but I just like reassurance at this point. If Representative Nash can comment on that, does he know?
My understanding is this does not impact the implementation of that other bill.
Thank you.
Representative Weber has her hand up.
Representative Weber.
Unmute.
Unmute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. The first part of the bill, which was inserted by Senator Rosenwald, simply makes it exceedingly clear that, now wait a minute, I've lost it again. That it makes it clear that mental health expenses are included. So it strengthens what we did before and clarifies, but it doesn't actually change anything.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wish to speak? The motion on the floor is on Senate Bill 149 as amended by 2021-1295H, moved by Representative Marsh, seconded by Representative Weber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
Votes yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Acton.
Yes.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
No.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Kofalt.
No.
Representative Weber.
Yes.
Representative McKay.
Yes.
Representative Snow.
Yes.
Representative Knirk.
Yes.
Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Representative Cannon, I believe is still absent. Representative Nutter Upham.
Yes.
Representative Shapiro.
Yes.
Representative Woods.
Yes.
Representative Query.
Yes.
Representative Pearson.
Yes.
The vote is 18 yes, 2 no, 1 absent.
Thank you. This ends the exec session, Senate Bill 149.
It was
Mr. Chairman, is there a question of consent or not?
I'm sorry, repeat, I have background noise. Please repeat.
Can the bill go on consent or is there objection to consent?
Objection.
There is objection to consent.
Thank you.
And I will let Representatives Cushman and Kofalt flip a coin as to who gets to write a minority report if you so wish. I think I'm going to do it.
Okay, I'll send you a draft.
Thank you, just to keep my skill set up. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Representative.
could we take a 5 or 10 minute break?
Well, the chair was very much considering that, so I will take that as a second.
I vote in favor.
Okay, the chair unanimously declares that we will take a 5 to 10 minute break.
Could you let us know whether it is 5 or 10 so we know when to be back?
10.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because Bill's better than nothing. And my vote didn't matter. Well, no, I mean, my. Because that's already there are some parts of it that, yeah, I do want to do more to it.
Transportation.
What, I knew that my vote wasn't going to change. If I did, I was going to vote with you just for solidarity, but not because
It's filled in for me.
I still felt that it's better than what's there, and to come back next year and to fix the things.
Excuse me, Health and Human Services. This is Pam Smarling upstairs. I just wanted you to know that the room is not muted. Would you like me to mute it?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry about that. But you just need to remember to unmute. There you go. Hi, this is Pam Smarling again. Just a reminder to unmute the room when you're ready to resume.
And Representative Cannon, can you hear us at this point?
Representative Cannon seems to have to be on here twice.
You only get to vote once.
Sorry,
Calm
I went to
yourself.
my backup system and then everything was silent. So I thought both systems were broken. So
Pretty tricky, Representative Cannon.
no. I've been victimized by Microsoft.
Oh, before you deal with it,
Yeah, I'm having some tech problems today too, but I'm ready to switch to my iPhone at a moment's notice.
Well, I've got my Chromebook next to me, but the sound is terrible. So.
Okay, I am opening the exec session on Senate Bill 162, relevant to all kinds of stuff. And when will they learn? And the chair recognizes Representative Marsh to move an amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we amendment 1402H of the Senate Bill 162, and I would like to speak to my motion.
Representative Marsh moves amendment 1402H. Is there a second?
I second it.
Representative Knurk, one of the sponsors of it, seconds it. Any discussion? Representative Marsh, speak to your motion.
Thank you. This amendment does three things. First of all, it clarifies language in section 12 of the bill so that cannabis registry identification cards do not inadvertently become a license to sell cigarettes to youth in the state of New Hampshire. And it's language which the department has agreed to clarify that section to make sure that unintended consequence does not happen. The second section of this amendment deals with the fact that section 48 of the bill, as you received it, was incomplete. It only, it was an amend and delete section to RSA 170A, and they only put in 170A:1 and didn't put in language for A2 through A7. So work with the department to complete that section of the bill. The last section of the bill adds a requirement for evaluations for children to be in compliance with the Federal First Prevention Services Act. This is Department requested language. My understanding was that they initially intended to add this to House Bill 120 as parallel to language that is in my bill, House Bill 120, requiring similar evaluations for children before they're put on psychotropic medication. However, the Senate had already passed that bill by the time this language was brought forward, and therefore this was thought to be an alternative moment for that. The purpose is that this language is required to access Title 4E funds for services that DCYF intends to provide. It also will improve the care of children placed into these facilities. So that's the three things that this amendment does.
Questions, discussion? Anyone on the screen?
No.
This is just on the amendment.
On bills.
This is on the amendment.
Okay.
This is discussion, questions, sharing on amendment 1402H by Representative Marsh and co-sponsored by Representative Knurk and Representative Merchant. Seeing nothing, then the matter before us is amendment 1402H to Senate Bill 162FN, moved by Representative Marsh, seconded by Representative Knurk. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Acton,
Yes.
Representative Gay,
Yes.
Representative Cushman,
Yes.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Kofalt.
Yes.
Representative Weber.
Yes.
Representative McKay.
Yes.
Representative Snow.
Yes.
Representative Knirk.
Yes.
Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Representative Cannon.
Yes.
Representative Nutter Upham.
Yes.
Representative Shapiro.
Yes.
Representative Woods.
Yes.
Representative Query.
Yes.
And Representative Pearson.
Yes.
And it passes 21-0.
21-0. The chair recognizes Representative Folsom for an amendment.
This amendment is.
You have to move it.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I move amendment 1490H.
Thank you. Is there a second? Representative Kelsey. Seconds. Now, Representative Folsom, to your amendment, please.
Yes, this is the first amendment that I brought forward because I was being approached with regarding two major sections of the cannabis section that basically had quite a few problems. And those two main problems that kept coming up with people were, one, the fact that because we're eliminating the fact that patients have to be designated to an ATC, there would be no way to track those patients and how much they're purchasing at other ATCs, possibly purchasing at other ATCs for the total amount that they're allowed each time. And the other major issue was the fact that now that there was no designation, every single qualifying patient was now every single person who had a medical cannabis card, which meant that with 7 ATCs, instead of there being enough cannabis grown and supported for 11,000 patients, there would be the possibility of enough cannabis being produced and having the supply on hand for 77,000 people. And so those were the two main things that I kept hearing over and over again from people. The first part, I really feel that I believe that the patients who use cannabis should be allowed to purchase it at any one of those ATCs. I strongly believe that. I believe that's not an issue. My issue is that they have put no rules in place as to how to track it, just like you would track any other medication in the state of New Hampshire. I was told that it would be too expensive. Well, the research I've been doing with other growers and providers, the amount that our new ATCs charge, there would be more than enough money to cover that cost. And it would not be a difficult cost. I can go into a Home Depot here in New Hampshire and buy some paint for my bedroom. And if I wanted to paint my friend's bedroom the same color when I'm visiting her in Colorado, I can go into a Home Depot there and go, oh, what was the color of my paint? And how much did I need to buy to do that room? And lo and behold, in about less than a minute, they could tell me that amount. So I do not believe that what we're being told as being an exorbitant expense necessarily is one. The other thing about the second issue with regards to the amount, I was basically told that why would the organizations that have this cannabis and are licensed to grow it want to grow more than they would actually sell. But yet they still want an increase in the amount that they have on hand, because they would have to destroy it. However, I am not satisfied with the whole management of the program, and I trust the patients inside and out. But on my own, I'm going to start looking at some of the companies that are running the program and seeing if the way they're running them are being run according to good practices. And if they are, I will congratulate them. And if they're not, this is one area where I would be very comfortable limiting their growth at that point. So those are my two main points on this, and I'd love to hear what other people think.
Thank you, Representative. Any comments, Representative Gay?
Thank you for taking my question. I thought that you had two potential amendments. Is this the one that would allow them to allow the ATCs to produce a lot more, like 3 times as much? Or is this the one that would maintain their current amount for the people who are assigned to them? And as you think of the answer to that, I was surprised to learn that already on the state website, where it lists all the ATCs, that they're actually in pairs. And so that currently any person who has a card to one of these pairs can go to either one. Either of the two or both. Excuse me. So if you could clarify which amendment this is.
Okay, this amendment basically takes out the section which removes the designation of ATC. So in doing that, the ATCs would have to use just their qualifying patients as their multiplying factor with regards to seeds and plants and product. The fact that you see on the website that you have some pairs that they can go to, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I believe that's because out of the 7 ATCs, there are only 4 licensures. So there's some companies that own more than one, and I think they're using a loophole to be able to pull that off. And so that's
Follow
up.
So this is the more restrictive.
This is more restrictive. Yes.
Anyone else? Representative Marsh.
Yes, I would like to ask if we could have the opinion of the department on this language, and I also would like to make a comment about the word loophole. It is my recollection that we passed a specific bill, I think it was last session, that allowed the ATCs to have a second location. So that was not a loophole. It was
right. May I speak, Mr. Chair, to answer some of these questions too?
Jay has his hand up next. My question was discussed.
Can I answer that question?
Representative Folsom may answer Representative Marsh's statement.
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about DHHS has to say, because I had conversations with 3 people at DHHS. They are against this amendment. They feel that the rights of the patient, which I even said right at the beginning, are very important, that they do not want that limited. And therefore, we need to do it for the patients, but they do not have any rules in place to manage that system.
That's right.
they have nothing. They don't even have the rules written. So that is what is happening there. And the reason why they initially did not want any limitations on the amount of cannabis that each center could grow was because some centers have more patients than others. So one center may need to produce and have more, but with the qualifying patient still in place, those numbers still stay higher for those ATCs. I would like it if this was removed this time and we come back at another point when the rules are in place, when the process is in place for tracking, and we're set to manage the amount of cannabis being produced and available.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Pinard.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify a couple things. First of all, rules are written after the legislation passes, because otherwise our departments would be doing a lot of rules for no good reason. So sure, there are not rules. It's important to understand that the whole goal of allowing people to go to different ATCs is to increase the patient freedom of choice to go to the ATC that they wish to for two reasons, basically. One is, one ATC may have a different strain with a certain cannabinoid profile and terpenes that works very well for that patient, but their designated ATC may not have it. So they could go to a different ATC and purchase that particular strain if they wish to. They can also change their ATC, but they may have a couple of different strains from different places that they would like to be able to get. First, they're rather geographically separated, so it's not real likely that people are going to run all over the state to be able to buy, but it would just be for that explicit reason. The second reason is to introduce a little bit of competition here, a little bit of free market competition, because the therapeutic cannabis prices are high. If you have some good competition between different ATCs, that may drive some traffic to one ATC, preferably over the other. That was the reason to lift the caps, was to give the flexibility so that if one ATC becomes predominant or begins to dominate a certain area, that they can grow more that they need. But it's really important to realize that the ATCs, as far as a cap, let's just address that part first. They currently are not growing anywhere near their maximum that they can grow. Their plant counts are about 6 to 13% of what they're currently allotted anyway. And the reason for that is they're pretty well maxed out on their space, but there is no market for what they grow except their ATC customers. They cannot sell it. If they did, they would lose their license. That means they lose their business. It also happens to be a felony, minor couple of things there. So there is no market for any excess cannabis, and that has an expiration time. Therefore, it would just have to simply be destroyed if they produce too much. That's not particularly good business. They can't export it anywhere. They can't sell it anywhere, only in their ATC. So the goal was to give this little bit of flexibility in terms of shifting of the market, because we don't want to take off the designated ATC, then suddenly have an ATC that can't produce enough because they become, if they're in the more southern part of the state and people can go to a different place, suddenly they become much more popular and they're getting a lot more business and they can't grow what they need. And then we have to come back to the legislature. So this was to preempt that potential problem. That other focus is always on that appearance or that problem that is really not a real problem of people buying cannabis at multiple ATCs and then reselling it. If they don't have a designated, they can go anywhere and be tracked. First of all, we do not track other medications except opioids, and we do track pseudoephedrine because it's a building block for methamphetamine. Otherwise, your prescriptions are not tracked. They are by the company, but they're not tracked by the state. So the key is that if people want to run around and buy stuff, it's a real problem, because it's illegal already for them to purchase more than a certain amount in a given time frame, to possess more than a certain amount, or to divert cannabis to any other person. Violation of that leads to loss of their card and criminal penalties, the felonies. Second, it doesn't make really good business sense to buy therapeutic cannabis and sell it in the black market. because their ATC cannabis is much more expensive than black market cannabis is. As a result, you'd be buying expensive cannabis to sell it at a loss. I don't think very many people are going to want to do that. And lastly, as far as tracking, currently in this state, any person who has a New Hampshire card can go across the border to Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Canada and buy cannabis legally. They're still violating the law in terms of possessing too much and so on. They also break another law by crossing a border, either state or international, with cannabis. But these people, it's not tracked. If somebody really wanted to circumvent this, they can do it now by just going to a neighboring state and purchasing legal recreational cannabis. I think I'll let Dennis Acton go back and give his little comment, but you got to realize most of these people, the major age of the people on therapeutic cannabis program are 50 and 60, the most common indication being pain. You know, this is not reefer madness. These are people using therapeutic cannabis reliably and responsibly, and we're just simply trying to improve the patient experience to be able to go have some competition as far as which ATC they go to, both for the brand, that the variety they want, and preferably maybe drive the price down. So that's this amendment is really, I think, not needed and would hurt some of the reforms you're trying to put into the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else wish to speak?
Representative Acton and Shapiro.
Representative Acton.
Did you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I made my point last time. That was embarrassing. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself here, but you guys know what I was trying to get at. Originally, the amendments were starting to pile up into one amendment, and I voiced my concern over that issue, that we should deal with these things separately, and that was done. So, Representative Knerk made the point that I was going to make as well. So I just, after the final testimony that came in the hearing from the police chief, really that hurt. That was painful to yet again have patients being treated like criminals. Just to boil it down to something we made. I've been a patient advocate for this for 14 years now, and we still are considered. And 350 got killed. It's just one thing after another, and I really wish people would stop trying to make it like we're all just waiting to break the law if given even the slightest chance. So thank you though for hearing me out.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Shapiro.
I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with a hand up on your screen?
No.
Anyone in the room? The motion before us is Amendment 2021-1490H to Senate Bill 162 FM. Moved by Representative Folsom, seconded by Representative Kelsey. Would the chair please call the roll?
The clerk would be glad to call the roll. Representative Marsh.
No.
Representative McMahon.
No.
Representative Nelson.
No.
Representative Acton.
No.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
No.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
No.
Representative Kofalt. See you there? I do not see. Oh, I can't see his face because he's off screen. Representative Weber.
No.
Representative McKay.
No.
Representative Snow.
No.
Representative Knerk.
No.
Thank you. Representative Soloway.
No.
Representative Cannon.
No.
Representative Francis Nutter Upham.
No.
Representative Shapiro.
No.
Representative Woods.
No.
Representative Query.
No.
Representative Pearson. 1497.
Are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you, but I have to see your face.
Yeah, I keep getting kicked off of the meeting. It's happened about 6 times in the past half hour, so I'm having some connectivity issues. I think I can connect now.
We'll hold it open for a minute.
So my vote was no on this one.
Okay, thank you.
I see that 3 to 18.
Yes.
So the motion is defeated, 3 yes and 18 no. Representative Folsom, would you like to move another amendment?
Yes, I would like to move amendment 1497.
And is there a second? Representative Gay seconds. Representative Folsom, please speak to your second amendment.
Okay, this amendment is a compromise amendment I worked out with Michael Holt over the weekend.
And who's Michael Holt?
I'm sorry, Michael Holt is the person who runs the medical cannabis program for the state.
Yep.
Okay. We went back and forth with many of the same arguments that we just shared regarding the last amendment. I had just promised quite a few people I would bring that amendment forward, so I did. This one is much larger compromise on my part and on the part of some other people. What this does is it does not remove the designation. So people can go to any one of those sites. And I will be working, probably looking at to find some way to track that like we do opioids. But that's not part of this amendment, but that's my goal coming out of this. So patients will still be able to go to any one of those sites. We also talked about the fact that did we really need an increase in the amount of cannabis that was being grown? Now, what we did is we reached a compromise. So instead of using the full figure of the number of qualifying patients now, which is 11,000 plus a few, we are limiting it to 25% of the total number of qualifying patients. So it brings, so any one of those sites could grow up to 25%. We're talking about the multiplying figure that is used against the number of seeds, the number of plants, the amount of product. So instead of using the whole 11,000 total, they only get to use 25% of that. What that does is it helps cover the ATCs who have a larger clientele pool because they're in the cities. That helps cover the fact that they are going to need more than necessarily the ATCs in the other part of the state that may not have as many patients.
Any further discussion or questions of the amendment writer? Representative Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard that this amendment is a compromise with Michael Holt of DHHS. I see that Michael Holt has his hand up as an attendee. And could we please hear from the department so we hear their side of this discussion?
The chair recognizes Michael Holt to come into the meeting.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Holt. I'm the administrator for the Therapeutic Cannabis Program. How may I help you?
Your name has been cited as one that the mover of this amendment consulted on Amendment 1497H.
That is true.
We would like you to say whatever you wish to say to us.
Thank you. I spoke with Representative Folsom last week about Amendment 1497. The compromise that she refers to is a compromise based on, this is where our conversation ended. A 25% cap on a plant count limit, I believe is unnecessary due to the testimony provided by Representative Knirk earlier, in that None of the ATCs are anywhere close to their current cap. However, a 25% cap does not pose a particular problem to the department or the ATCs. Like I said, it's unnecessary, but it will not limit their ability to serve the patients of New Hampshire. The only outlier concern that I would have is that if every patient decided to go to the same ATC and not utilize the other one, that single ATC would not have the sufficient quantity of plants and cannabis to be used. However, I do think that's an unlikely scenario. Currently, there are approximately 12,000 patients in the state, 4 ATCs with 3 operators. There are only 3 cannabis operators in the state. This bill would split them up based on license, 25% per license, although there are only 3 operators. So it doesn't pose any particular harm, but in my view, it is unnecessary.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Would you please stay in the meeting in case there are questions of yourself? Representative Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Holt, and thank you for taking my question. You said that there are 3 growers in the state, and we are capping each of the 3 at 25% of the qualified patients registered under this chapter. By my math, that means we'd be able to do 75% of the anticipated patients, and that's not 100%. So could you clarify that for me, please?
There are 4 ATC licenses. 1 operator has 2 of those licenses. Under the proposed amendment, each license would be capped at 25%, which means that one of the ATCs, the one that holds 2 licenses, would be capped at 50%. That's how you get to 100%.
Follow-up. Thank you. One more follow-up, and this will be my last one. So if we're growing exactly 100% of the qualified patients, is there any adjustment allowed if one ATC happens to have more patients than the others? Because it seems to me that if there's any inequality in the distribution of patients, someone's going to run out of hands.
Under this bill, there are no designated ATCs. So there are no longer any, we don't know who is going to go where. Currently, there is a range of, from about 1,200 patients for the lowest ATC to about 4,500 patients to the ATC that has the most patients. So we don't really know the answer to that. I think it is possible, but very unlikely that the most popular ATC, the ATC that does the best at the friendly competition that Representative Knurk was saying, yeah, it's possible that they would get closer to their maximums. The data that I have shows that the maximum is up to 70% under a 25% cap. I can't imagine it going, again, I can't imagine there being a problem with the 20% cap here because patients will continue to go to all the ATCs in the state.
Thank you. My question's been answered.
Anyone else with a question for Mr. Holt or a comment about the proposed amendment?
I have a comment.
Representative Gay had her hand up marginally before yours. So Representative Gay.
This is an overall kind of view that my concern is not with allowing more people to go. So I'm not against this bill. What my concern is that I think most of us, our concern is for the patients, that we want to make sure they have access to these, to the right kind of cannabis for them. My concern is that as more and more bills come, it's that cannabis across the country is a big growing concern that's making some people very wealthy. It's not just, we know about big tobacco, we know about big pharma. Well, this is a big enterprise too. And I would like us to have some more thought for future reference about not allowing it to take over as tobacco and pharmaceuticals did. I'd rather put the skids on now instead of, oh my gosh, we have a problem, what do we do now? So that is my concern. It's not this bill, it's as this bill expands in the future.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Knirk.
Thank you. Just one thing I did something to say, but I wanted to go back to to clarify a bit what I think Mr. Holt was saying earlier too. That issue is that under the bill without this amendment, there would be the flexibility to be able to allow one ATC to produce more if they needed to because they had more patients. With this amendment, we have the 25% cap. Currently, they could probably increase a fair amount, as Mr. Holt points out. You'd have to have one become extremely dominant before they would then run out. But the important thing is, currently, there are designated centers. If we take away the designated ATC, but we pass this amendment, there is the chance of having one predominant ATC who does a good job, unable to produce their amount that they need. Without this amendment, we don't have that, which is why I think this is still an unnecessary amendment because, again, I already said all my other comments, they're not growing more than they can sell. There's no market for it. They have to just destroy it. That's not good business, so they're not going to do that. But this gets us in statute the flexibility to be ready if things do change. What I wanted to say earlier is somebody earlier made a comment about comparing cannabis to opioids. It really is a very different thing. In the last 20 years, about 500,000 people have died of opioid overdose. And you can probably count on your hands and toes the number of people that died of a true cannabis overdose. And the reason for that is very clear. There are no cannabinoid receptors in the portion of the brain that controls respiration, but there are opioid receptors. That's how you get killed. Yes, there are problems potentially with driving under the influence, as there is with opioids, with alcohol, and with not enough sleep. But we also don't think that there's no good evidence that that's a major problem either. So again, to clarify, this is not as deadly as cannabinoids. It doesn't need that kind of solid tracking. And if we want to have tracking, we could probably still try to put that in, but we would have to appropriate some money to the program to do that. They're not awash in money to be able to put in a tracking system at this point in time. That would be a bill for another day if we wish to. So in essence, I echo what Mr. Holt said. We can live with this, although there is a potential for one ATC perhaps to get into trouble with not being able to produce enough and needing to come to the legislature to change it. But I think it's unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else? Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Holt, for taking my question. I have a couple. My understanding that if one ATC license runs short of a product, and a different ATC has an excess, they're allowed to sell at whatever wholesale price they can sell to the other ATC. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Representative Woods. That is correct. Current law does allow sale between the New Hampshire ATCs.
Good. Thank you. You may or may not have the amendment in front of you, but on line 7, item parentheses 1, and then line 9, parentheses 2, seem to be at odds. It says in the first line that what can be grown, but they're very different, and the quantities would be very different. I need some help understanding the difference between the two.
Thank you, Representative Woods. I don't disagree that this section of the existing law is not a model of clarity. This provision has gotten some attention, or I believe it was the result of a compromise when the bill was drafted, and it has never been completely, or has never been addressed, the lack of clarity. What the department, I can explain what the department interprets number 1 to mean is that is an excess amount. So being the standard amount 3 plants, 12 seedlings, 6 ounces for each patient who's designated that particular ATC. In our rules, we explain that paragraph 1, 80 cannabis plants, 160 seedlings, and another 80 ounces is an extra amount to deal with failed crops, sale to other ATCs, and for startup costs. So, no, and because these 2 paragraphs are connected by an and, they would be added. So in addition to the per patient amount in 2, the ATCs are also allowed to possess this number of extra plants that are unrelated to per patient.
So if I understand correctly, the way the rest of the bill, follow up, Mr. Chair?
Follow up.
So if my understanding is correct, then would the term on line 8, qualifying patient in parentheses 1, does that mean per ATC, or the way we've written the rest of it, would that be qualifying patients registered under this chapter?
We have written our rules essentially to disregard that clause, or 6 ounces of usable cannabis per qualifying patient, because it's redundant with the paragraph, the provision in 2. So our rules establish the 80 plants, 160 seedlings, and 80 ounces of usable cannabis, full stop.
Okay, so basically we could strike lines 7 and 8, and that would help clarify.
You could strike line 7 and 8, starting with the comma before the word or, and that would remove the confusion in the current law.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Folsom.
When you're looking at lines 7 and 8 and then followed with the 2 in parentheses, what is interesting is the very last word on line 8 is the word and. So technically by law, it's an and, even though the rules have been written as just the portion under number 2.
No.
And the fact, yeah, and so one of the things that with regards to making sure that an ATC does not run out is, one, the ability to have a transaction between ATCs, and then also the fact that it has been explained to me that most people will probably stay at their same ATC, so there won't be a huge shift in what's going on, and the 25% still gives them plenty of room, but it just helps put, like Representative Gay said, puts the skids on a little bit, just to kind of, this whole medical cannabis program was promoted to be a program that was going to be tightly run. And so when it was passed, and so I'd like to see it be tightly run.
Anyone else? Representative McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spent years as chairman of the Medical Marijuana Commission. One of the major concerns has always been access to the marijuana. There's always been conflict. Particular chief of police has been voted as a standing position that he's held for 5 years plus. So that comes as absolutely no surprise. My concern is anything that interferes with the individual's access to those individuals who are qualified to get the medical marijuana. It's always going to say medication. Obviously, it isn't. So I don't think that this amendment helps. I think what it does is makes access more difficult. So I'll vote against.
Thank you, Representative. Is there another hand up on the screen?
Yes, Shapiro.
Representative Shapiro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question might have been answered in part with the response to Representative Wood's question. But Mr. Holt, I understand from what you're saying that while you don't think this is necessary, that it's very unlikely that ATCs would run out of products. But I'm wondering if this 25% limit would constrain the choice of products at any given ATC, if it would limit or constrain the strains that maybe become popular because they're more effective at any particular ATC, or is that not an issue?
Thank you for the question, Representative Shapiro. I honestly don't know. The ATCs have not had an opportunity to weigh in on this cap. I don't, like I said at the beginning, I don't think this is a huge problem to pass this amendment. I think it's unnecessary. I think the concerns are, largely unfounded, but it may have downstream consequences that we're not aware of. ATCs are able to sell to one another. So if one got in a real pinch, then, presumably a certain strain could be, backfilled by another ATC if that second ATC sold that strain or produced the same products. But at that point, well, the patient could go to the other ATC. All their formulations are slightly different. They all sell flower, they all sell tincture, they all sell vape cartridges, but the variety, the strains, they differentiate between the ATCs. I think the answer is we don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think there's a possibility of downstream impacts that we can't quite envision at this time. But I'd rather this bill get passed.
Thank you.
I think I see Representative Weber. Right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to say that, yes, historically, this bill has been very tightly controlled. And even with the loosening of controls that we see in this bill, I think we still have a pretty good handle on what's going on. And of course, the difference is that now we have a track record, and the issues that have come up have been on the part of patients not being able to get what they need. They've been issues of access, they've been issues of price, they've been issues of being able to get the right product that you need for your condition. And I think that this bill, as it was originally drafted, helps with all of those. I'm particularly pleased with the aspect of competition that might actually drive some pretty expensive prices down a little bit. And finally, I just want to second two of the points that Representative Acton made earlier. One being that we are talking patients here, and patients should not be subject to the kinds of hoops to get something that will treat them. And so I'm for removal of hoops for patients rather than increasing or having the possibility of increasing hoops for patient on the one hand. And on the second thing, and this is just globally, not this amendment, I also second what Representative Acton said about not being a fan of omnibus bills and being very appreciative of having the amendments be offered one by one so we can vote on them individually. So I thank people for that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Folsom.
Okay, I'll just thank you so much to the rest of the committee for allowing this freshman legislator to come out here on such a simple issue and get her feet wet. And I just have a couple little comments just to respond to some other people's comments. And that is one, if we're worried about ATCs not having particular strains because they become more popular, it's a good business model that if you have a strain that's becoming more popular, you're going to start carrying more of that product. And the competition issue, I'm having some problem with because of the fact that you have the same group owning license for multiple sites. So if one company owns, or we're limiting the number of companies that own these ATCs, there's not a lot of incentive to drop their prices. And thank you very much for helping me walk through this amendment. And it's been an incredible learning experience.
Representative Knirk.
You're on mute.
I just muted myself. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I think Mike Holt kind of gave a sotto voce no at one point about still that confusion of lines 7, 8, and 9 when Representative Folsom was earlier speaking. And I was hoping he would address that. Could he, I think there was still some confusion about the fact that it was one set of data and that the rules still allowed both 1 and 2. It just took out the 6 ounces of usable cannabis because that was redundant. Could he clarify that for us?
Thank you, Representative Knirk. Yes, your summary is correct. In our rules, we have the same structure as in the statute in that it is an and. There are 2 categories. We established the primary category as the per patient amount that's in paragraph 2. We go on to say, and up to an additional 80 mature plants, 160 seedlings, and 80 ounces of usable cannabis, including for startup operations to assist with a failed batch of cannabis, to allow sufficient quantity of cannabis for new patients, or to fill requests for the sale of cannabis to other ATCs. In our rules, we have not included the confusing language from the statute.
Representative Knirk.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. The other thing, in terms of the strains and competition, indeed, I think we will see that. In statute, this was set up with 4 ATCs. We expanded to some other areas because there were markedly underserved areas, particularly the North Country and down in the Southwest. And that's why some ATCs have more than one actual sales front but in statute, it's only set at 4, and we'd have to change that, and we have not done so. As far as a strain, it does take some time to start growing another strain. It's a botanical product. And if you say, wow, this is really going to be good, you have to ramp up production, and it's going to be a significant amount of time. So it isn't a simple switch turn. There's no supply chain going elsewhere. But indeed, it is expected that we would see the ATCs respond to the demand. That would be the hope. Thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Gay.
One of my concerns that, again, it's not exactly in this bill, but one of my concerns is that we're speaking it as if people want it so we don't need any kind of controls. The pharmaceutical industry, from the personal point of view, not the industry, but me as a purchaser, I have to be bound by controls. So I don't want to go totally like, we don't need controls. Because if we didn't need controls, why do we have them on pharmaceuticals? If I want a painkiller, I can't just go to the nearby store and show my card and buy as much as I want, or even the limit on what it wants. You know, it's supposed to be tailored to what I should have. So I am concerned about treating marijuana, medical marijuana, therapeutic marijuana, which I do think is a good thing. I'm just a little concerned about the laissez-faire. It feels laissez-faire about this as opposed to a pharmaceutical. I'd be happy if the federal government didn't keep acting like marijuana was totally illegal, so that everybody has to be bound by their rules, if it was treated as a pharmaceutical and the different mixes were in pill form, and it was a controlled thing, because you can say, oh, it's not a hard drug, it doesn't affect the brain, but we know for a fact that lots of people are addicted to it, in addition to a zillion other things in New Hampshire, which is a severe problem that we temporarily forgot in dealing with COVID. So I would really like people to get their mindset to combine the way you treat pharmaceuticals and the way you treat therapeutic cannabis. It shouldn't be two separate ways to deal. We really need to put the same controls on anything that's affecting the mind or body, with the same care that we do to pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, Representative Knirk.
We do not have anything in statute that limits how much product pharmaceuticals can make. I don't think that there's any limit on how many lisinopril pills the producer can make. And we also don't limit where they can sell them. This is extremely tightly regulated in our state program, and it is not a laissez-faire program. So if we're going to make a comparison to pharmaceuticals, we would throw out a lot of the restrictions we currently have in the therapeutic cannabis program. Also, though, the rate of actual addiction in cannabis is not everybody. I'm quite sure it's around 12%, I think is the current number, who actually do have cannabis use disorder, but that's primarily in recreational patients. Do understand, again, as I've said before, in therapeutic cannabis, we start with a low dose, we slowly titrate to get the therapeutic effect while avoiding the unwanted effects of euphoria and mental disruption, because that is not the intended effect. That is a side effect. And so we do not see, with the cannabis use disorder rate in therapeutic cannabis is probably markedly smaller. We do not have that data. That is markedly different than the addiction rate in opioids. Thank you.
One follow-up.
I did not mean controlling the pharmaceutical end of it. I meant I am controlled by what I can get at the pharmacy. So I wasn't making a comparison. I am controlled. I can't just take a card, it says I'm entitled to this much, and just go multiple places and get it. The control is on the patient. So I didn't mean to make a foolish comparison of the suppliers of pharmaceuticals and the suppliers of, although that's how we try to control it in the state. We try to control who dispenses. And we definitely need to change the law so that we don't have 4 people controlling the whole, the whole therapeutic cannabis in the state.
I'd like to get to a roll call on this. If anyone has anything that we haven't heard and really needs to say it. I don't see anyone. The motion before us is Amendment 1497H to Senate Bill 162 FN, moved by Representative Folsom, seconded by Representative Gay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
No.
Representative Acton.
No.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
No.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Cobalt.
No.
Representative Weber.
No.
Representative McKay.
No.
Representative Snow.
No.
Representative Knirk.
No.
Representative Soloway.
No.
Representative Cannon.
No.
Representative Nutter Upham.
No.
Representative Shapiro.
No.
Representative Woods.
No.
Representative Query,
No.
Representative Pearson,
Yes.
sorry,
No.
14-7.
7 in favor, 14 opposed. The motion fails. I do not see before me any further amendments. If anyone does, please let me know. I want to get it right. Now before us is Senate Bill 162 FN as amended by 2021-1402. The chair will entertain a motion on this bill. Representative Marsh.
Mr. Chairman, I move that that Senate Bill 162 as amended by Amendment 1402H ought to pass.
Representative Marsh moves ought to pass. Do we have a second?
I will second. Miracle second.
That is ought to pass as amended. Knurk
Yes.
seconds. Now discussion on the bill as amended. Well, while people are thinking about it, the chair would like to just comment on section 59, coverage plan for services to individuals with developmental disabilities. As a group that I spent some time working with 2 of the area agencies on, there has been an age gap, 18 to 21. It's nice to see that that is somewhat being addressed in here. That's all I have to say. That is on page 31, and actually, I would like to continue that the Department of Health and Human Services incorporate in its appropriation request the cost of fully funding services to eligible persons. This is the wait list thing. This is something I was very happy that Representative Weiler, Chair of Finance, allowed me to grill him for several minutes lobbying on this behalf. Anybody else? Representative Folsom.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say before we vote that there are incredible, great things in this bill that need to go through. So even though the things that I don't like about it are stuck in there, I am in support of the bill.
Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to section 59, what part of statute, because I had asked Melissa St. Cyr to clarify, because I was confused on why the fiscal note had, zeros across for the impact of this section, if it's saying that it's providing funding for, but Ms. St. Cyr clarified that section 59 only requires the department to work on a plan. And I had played with changing the language to say, shall provide a plan for, develop a plan, proposed action plan, something. And I was waiting to hear back from her on what statute section 59 amendments or changes, or where in statute the language is going to be inserted. Do you know? Because it doesn't have any reference to RFA.
I'm looking at the side-by-side that Christina Dyer provided us with the Senate bill on the left side and notes Senate on the right. And the notes read, that this section 59 designates collaboration with DHS, DOE, DRC of New Hampshire, and the 10 area agencies.
Yeah.
That's all it says.
Okay, so, but we don't know where this language is going to go.
John Williams is on the call.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Counselor, please come into the meeting.
No.
John Williams being promoted to the meeting.
And I have to unmute. So thank you very much. That will end up in what they call session law or chapter law. It's not related to a specific RSA, but it carries the full force as if it were in an RSA. And I got the knowing nod and approval of Representative Weber, so I have a double confirmation that that is absolutely correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
Weber has her hand up.
Representative Weber.
Just as a further clarification, session law doesn't get published in the books. It usually gets used for a freestanding thing like this, which is expected to be done in a certain amount of time, which this is. And as Mr. Williams said, it's a mandate, it's law, but we don't put it into the session, into the actual statute books, because it's one of those things that simply happens among a group of people and it gets done. And our researchers and various other people do actually pull their hair out tracking these things because they do get tracked. They do not get forgotten. And people in the Speaker's office also. But this is just a freestanding mandate to a group of people to get together and form a plan. So there isn't going to be a permanent home for it in the statutes, because we hope that they will get together and form a plan, and that will be presented to us at a further legislative session for our action.
Representative Weber, would the fact that it has a sunset provision this year be another reason why it would not go into the law books?
Exactly.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Can I just give Representative Cushman the Eagle Eye Award for noting that, though? That was very good. Thank you.
One Eagle Eye Award has been bestowed. Much coveted. What else? Okay, Eagle Eye Cushman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do just have a bit of an issue. We discussed this this interstate compact a bit about the placement of children, and there was some debate on whether it becomes a federal program if we join it, and then we lose our autonomy over it. And I know that Representative Folsom tried to reach out to multiple organizations who are involved in this and didn't receive any feedback, didn't receive any calls back or emails. So I'm uncomfortable. I think that this part of the bill just totally is like doesn't fit in with everything else that this bill does. And it's like couched in the middle of the bill, and yes, it's page 14.
It's the major portion of the bill.
The interstate compact for the placement of children. Bottom of page 10.
Thank you. Yeah.
Section 48.
Yeah, so I'm just not comfortable with this section of the bill at all, and I won't be voting in favor of it because of that.
The side-by-side notes provided by Christina Daya read this way about this compact. This is the 2009 Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children version, which replaces the current version, but is not in effect until passage by 35 states. That's what I'm reading. Refiling of 2020 Senate Bill 698 at the request of DHHS. This died on the table in the House. For what that's worth. Representative Snow.
No, I didn't. I just scratched my head.
Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spent some time working on section 48. As you know, the amendment that we adopted did incorporate some new provisions into section 48. The state of New Hampshire has been part of the interstate compact for the placement of children since 1965. However, the compact has been updated, and the purpose of this section of the bill is to update the current compact with the new compact once enough states have adopted the new compact that it becomes operational. So, in fact, this does not change the fact that we've been part of this compact for, that's 35 years without any harms to the state of New Hampshire. In fact, it allows us to do things like have adoptions across state lines and things like that. And therefore, I very much support this section of the bill. I think it's important for us to keep up to date as this compact has been updated to reflect changes in law really everywhere over the last 35 years.
Would the representative have, or anyone else happen to know how many states have thus far ratified this language?
What I do know is that it's unlikely that it will meet the 35 state threshold this year. But of course, that's not known to us.
Thank you.
Representative Weber has her hand up.
Thank you. I'm not getting much answer here. Representative Weber.
Representative Weber had her hand up but was muted, so that's why. And thank you. I just want to make it very clear. I want to second everything that Representative Marsh said, but I also want to make it very clear. This does not become federal law. All that ever happens with us is what we as a legislature have adopted. And there's a further caveat that until 34 other legislatures also adopt similar measures, it won't go into effect more broadly. But when it goes into effect, it will only go into effect for those states that have actually adopted the update. And some of the other provisions that would be very helpful that are in this is it will make it much easier for a child in need of foster care to go into a relative placement, say in the state of Maine or the state of Vermont or the state of Massachusetts, so that we can keep families as intact as possible when a child is in need of foster care, rather than having to take that child and put it into a foster family in New Hampshire. And it also allows us to track that child and make sure that that child is being dealt with appropriately when they're not physically in the state. So I think it's very useful going forward, and it is just an update of something that's been in place for decades. Thank you.
Representative Weber, the chair has a question for you, or indeed anyone who may know the answer. Where does the number 35 come from? Who says it has to be 35?
It's contained in the bill somewhere, and I will continue to look at it, but it's on the top of page 11. On the effective date of this chapter, based upon the enactment of the Interstate Compact for the placement of children into law by the 35th compacting state, the governor is authorized and directed to execute a compact on behalf of this state with any other state or states legally joining. So once the 35th ratification comes through, then the governor can execute the paperwork back and forth. That
I understood. What I wonder is, who says 35? Did some states start with the bill? And
it's quite common when you have one of these interstate compacts that somebody comes up with a threshold number. I'm remembering the last time we saw a threshold number like that was when we passed the SIPE Act, which was an interstate compact on allowing psychologists to practice across state lines.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what the threshold in that was, but there was one. And I think it was a much lower threshold, actually. But again, these are a matter of negotiation among states and among the drafters in the various states. I know that for many of our uniform laws, there's actually an interstate commission on uniform laws, like the Uniform Probate Code or the Uniform Commercial Code. Each state sends delegates, they work out a new version, and then each state does with the new version what the state wants to do. So it's very much a collaborative effort, but without the buy-in from individual states, it doesn't happen.
Well, somebody started at one point. There is a similar thing with radiologists that I've been looking at.
And the issue is it's 2/3 of the number of states. That's probably why it was chosen.
Okay. Representative Folsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am so glad Representative Weber is with us today because I've got a question for you. It's a legal question. And it's one of the ones that I had to go online and look up because I couldn't get anybody to answer it for me. Interstate compacts. I tried to find the answer to this question because the way I read it online is when an interstate compact is in effect and a state is part of it, if the federal government creates rules or laws that differ from those of the individual states, that the federal law trumps the state law. Is that?
Well, that if the interstate compact, and because it's an interstate compact,
right,
it's something that the federal government also has some jurisdiction over it. If the federal government decides to enact a law that conflicts in the same area, that law would in fact control, unless somebody successfully brings a lawsuit and says, federal government, this was not something that was delegated to the feds. This is something that was reserved to the states. Certainly the care of children is something that is reserved, generally speaking, to the individual states. So I'm not sure, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, and I'm a long retired attorney, so I'm not sure how a challenge to this would be received if they enacted something in this area. But whether we adopt a compact or whether we don't adopt a compact, they can do what they want to do anyway. And again, it's up to people in individual states who are affected to bring a challenge to whether they exceeded their federal authority or not. And that wouldn't be changed whether we adopt this compact or whether we reject it.
Thank you very much. I was thinking the same thoughts, but I needed a lawyer to say that.
You're, as far as I know, you're good to go on that.
This is not just for questions. This is an exec session, so it can be sharing or statement. Representative Gay is called for.
Thank you for allowing me to ask. This probably really is for Representative Weber. Can other states, is there a list of 35 who've already been sharing this responsibility? Or is this just a number and any state could choose to join?
There is undoubtedly somewhere a list of those who have adopted it already. I don't happen to have that list. It would be a great question to ask Ms. Dyer or the folks at OLS who do research for individual representatives. I don't, it certainly has already been passed by the threshold number of states in some of its earlier versions because we operate with it now. We already had it in law. And what we have currently in law is cumbersome and clunky. And of course, because they repealed the whole thing and didn't do the usual thing that we have with line out and replacements, you don't see that. But this simply allows more cooperation and more reaction to the current issues than something that's significantly older.
Less clunky.
Less clunky.
This is the chair. It's interesting to me that what is before us is the 2009 version. It's just 12 years old. And like some amendments to the Constitution that have been proposed, we haven't got to the threshold yet. We're 12 years late into the game, and we haven't hit the magical 35. Just a comment, just an observation. Representative Folsom.
Just for information, the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children has a website. So you can find out a whole bunch about it online. Very easy to find. Just not the rules.
Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of my concerns, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone who may know better, on page 16 of the bill, we're in section 4, and it's Roman numeral 7. It says nothing in this article shall limit the receiving state's ability to take emergency jurisdiction for the protection of the child. So at first it says in the beginning of that section, except as provided in Article 7. As provided in Article 4, paragraph 8 and 5, that the original state, has jurisdiction over this child. But then it says that the state that the child gets sent to, the receiving state, has the ability to take over jurisdiction of that child. So that's really concerning to me. So if they go to another state and they have different child protection laws, and they're with their relative, and now all of a sudden that state takes jurisdiction of the child and places it with someone else.
Representative Weber.
I believe that what this does is that it allows another state, if a child is found wandering on the street with no shoes, to take immediate jurisdiction over that child and take immediate prevent measures for the protection of the child. It's truly an emergency provision. It does not, because otherwise, if we didn't have that savings clause, a child wandering around on the street unsupervised, they would have to try and figure out where the original state was. They wouldn't know because the child might be young enough not to be able to tell them. So it's simply, my understanding of provisions like this is it simply allows an emergency action to be taken to make sure that a child who's in jeopardy, either from another person or because they've gotten lost or whatever has happened to the child, and look after the child while they're making the inquiries about the proper jurisdiction for looking after the child and the proper communications that are set out in the rest of the statute. But it's only in an emergency.
This is the chair speaking. Since I do not have in front of me the version that is currently operative in New Hampshire, which predates the 2009 version, which is before us, I have no way of knowing if such emergency jurisdictions are already operative in New Hampshire. A lot of this stuff, I'm sure, isn't original. It's updated. It's some change made here and there, but I'm willing to bet a good chunk of this interstate compact we're already doing because an earlier version hasn't. That's just a guess on my part, but I think I'm on solid ground. Representative Marsh.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry I can't give you a page and line reference because I run out of power in my laptop. But there is another section of the Interstate Compact which outlines the court procedures which must be followed if a sending state is giving up its authority over a child which has been sent. And so that's very clearly specified in the bill. And if somebody wants to hand me a paper copy, I'll be glad to find you the page.
Of the bill itself.
Yes.
I'm working on finding also, but
Okay, let's give us a few minutes to do that before we move on.
Well, actually, by the way, it's you go to just the statutes. 170A is the current one that we have.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you have the bill right on that section. It's page 15, starting with line 35.
Page 15. Those who are questioning this will want to pay attention to this discussion and not have a separate one. Go ahead.
It says, in accordance with its own laws, the court of the sending state shall have
I'm
authority.
sorry, I cannot hear, Mr. Chairman.
Station in this one. Go ahead.
Yes, the bill reads on page 15, starting with line 35. In accordance with its own laws, the court in the sending state shall have authority to terminate its jurisdiction if A, the child is reunified with the parent in the receiving stage as the subject of allegations or findings of abuse or neglect, only with the concurrence of the public child placing agency in the receiving state. B, the child is adopted. C, the child reaches the age of majority under the laws of the sending state. D, the child achieves legal independence pursuant to the laws of the sending state. E, a guardianship is created by the court in the receiving state with the concurrence of the court in the sending state. F, an Indian tribe has petitioned for and received jurisdiction from the court in the sending state. Or G, the public child placing agency of the sending state requests termination and has obtained the concurrence of the public child placing agency in the receiving state. And I believe that those are adequate protections for children who may be sent to other jurisdictions.
So then it would be fair to assume that emergency is exactly that. It is Representative Weber's example of a child wandering around barefoot, but not just some arbitrary, we're keeping the kid.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concerns are still not alleviated because there's no language in here that says, you know, oh, they can take jurisdiction for an emergency and then they need to be sent immediately back to the original, the sending state. You know, if they take jurisdiction over the child, do they not then have the authority to place that child in a foster home in the state where they have jurisdiction?
This is the chairman. It would seem to me that once the emergency is over, we revert to the rules that are in place vis-a-vis the sending state and the receiving state. Emergency is over, the child is back where the child should be and has shoes on, and so the emergency is over, so we continue as we have been. I mean, that's what it seems.
Exactly.
But what if the emergency is they deem the parent that the sending state sent it to is somehow unfit, so they take emergency custody of the child, which is very common to happen. Now they have jurisdiction over that child, and is there something to require them to send the child back to the sending state for their jurisdiction to take?
Representative Marsh.
Yes, if both states have adopted the interstate compact, they have to abide by the provisions of the interstate compact. That's why we have an interstate compact. If there were not an interstate compact, you would be correct that there would be no reason that the other state would have to send a child.
Right.
Representative Snow, you've been a social worker for a long time, and I bet these things
Longer
come
than
out.
anyone likes to think about, to tell you the truth. But I also think one of the factors that we should look at, since 2009, New Hampshire has brought into place what's called a child advocate, and I think her role in all of this substantially changes what would go on with it. She'd have a much more powerful position. So I think we have to kind of evaluate that, but that's a big change from where we were when this 2009 original contemplated interstate compact is set up.
Well, actually, what we have before us is the 2009 version.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your experience with the child's advocate is now we have a person who does exactly what the title says, advocates for the child.
For the
So
child.
if this child is sent hither and yon, the advocate still has interest in that child.
My assumption is that if a decision is made, say by DCYF, to send a child somewhere else, that child advocate would play a role in this and could either recommend or discontinue the action. No, that's her role, to look what's best for the child. What is going to best protect this child from whatever situation they're facing. Decision made by one agency would not necessarily hold. She could enter into that situation and change it.
Thank you, Representative Snow. Do I see a hand on the screen?
Yes, Representative Weber and also Representative Shapiro.
Okay, thank you. Representative Weber, you may go first, and then Representative Shapiro.
I think we need to be a little careful with the role of the Office of the Child Advocate. That office is not automatically involved in every case. But the fact is that whether a child is in placement here or in placement in another state, if a parent or family member is concerned about that child or concerned about how DCYF has handled a particular case, they can certainly will receive a complaint here and follow up on that. And I certainly have referred a number of people who have concerns about how their case has been handled by DCYF, both to the ombudsman within DCYF and to the Office of Child Advocacy, so that whatever issues have come up can be resolved. And they certainly will help in that way. And the other thing I will say is that in my experience, if the Office of the Child Advocate perceives a pattern that they find troubling on behalf of a group of children, they have been fierce in detailing those problems and working to get them fixed, whether that requires a legislative fix or something else.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Shapiro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a former family and child therapist, and also as a former child protective services worker in Vermont, I think it's important while we're analyzing this and being careful that it's written well, we should also keep in mind that without New Hampshire being part of this, we would be in great trouble. This is something that's used fairly frequently. It's used, it's used, as Representative Weber said, to place kids with family rather than in institutions. And I think that without joining this compact, we would be at a great disadvantage. And there are many, many checks and balances if things go wrong, including the courts, because kids have to be adjudicated to be in the system. And families can go to court, and there are regular court hearings. So I think there are many checks and balances, and we have to remember that this is a very important thing for us to have, because it really serves the well-being of children and families.
Representative Shapiro, am I correct to infer from what you said that we are not currently in a compact with other states?
My understanding from this discussion is that we are in a compact, but it is an older compact, and this is an attempt to update it.
Okay. It would be difficult for me, not having the older compact in front of me, to know where we are simply carrying over things and where we are making positive changes.
Mr. Chair, may I speak to that?
To that point, yes, Representative Knurr.
Yes. The website has all this on it. And this was actually what Christina Dyer initially sent us. She sent us a link to it. It's AP as in Peter, HSA.org. anyway, you can also just Google Interstate Compact for Placement of Children. But yes, we are part of that. All 50 states are part of this compact already. This is simply a new version, and it is actually, again, does not go into effect until 35 states. 11 states have approved the new version. It's been introduced in Arizona. It's been passed by one chamber in Kentucky, but their map is not up to date because they don't have it in our chamber, that it's been passed in our chamber. They do have a side-by-side comparison. If desired, I could send that link to the entire committee, and that would give you that.
I would appreciate that for my edification. I'm not sure that we would have it in time. I really do hope we get done with this today and not have to come back next week.
Well, a follow-up, I do not think we should delay what we're doing. This is just an update to bring us up to date. The point is we are already in a compact that we need. I think we should pass this so we can just be to the revised new. But again, it doesn't going to take effect until 2/3 of the states have agreed with this, and then we can go ahead and proceed with it.
And your statement is we are up to 11 states presently.
That is what it says on their website.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Representative Marsh, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will point out that people can read the existing compact and the existing RSA 170-A:1. And I would also point out that I believe John Williams spoke to us earlier. He probably can answer the legal question. And if not, he could quickly get in touch with Rebecca Ross, who I'm certain could answer Representative Cushman's question without any delay.
Councilor Williams, can you speak to this point or find someone?
Chairman, absolutely. I believe we have Attorney Ross with us, and if she could just raise her hand, and if Ms. Dyer would bring her into the conversation, she's at the ready to address the questions regarding the updating of the Interstate Compact.
Would the House bring her into the meeting, please?
She's on the way.
Thank you. Pam Smarling is pinch hitting for Christina Dyer, who had to leave for an emergency.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm happy to try to help clarify. I believe Representative Cushman's question is if other states would just be able to take jurisdiction and keep it in the course of an emergency. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I believe the answer would be no. And part of being a member of the commission and being part of an ICPC state is that would not be able to happen. Once the 35 states adopt ICPC or the 2009 version, it would bring together the commission, who would sit together and write essentially the equivalent of the administrative rules on the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of how all of that would happen. But it doesn't happen like that today under the current ICPC, and it certainly would not under the continued ICPC. The point is to have better collaboration and clarity and communication with the states that we partner with, not to allow one state to trump the other state. And if it were not a DCYF related case and it were another parenting case or other type of case, there are other things like the Uniform Custody Acts and other acts that we are involved in that would also not permit another state to take jurisdiction over a New Hampshire child.
Does that address your concern, Representative Cushman, or do you have a follow-up question?
Follow-up question and statement, I suppose.
Go ahead.
So there is then in this bill, in this section of the bill concerning this content, there is no way to ensure that the state that takes over emergency jurisdiction only maintains it for as long as it takes to get the child back to the sending state.
Well, I think that
yes or no question.
I believe it depends, because it would have to do with the rules that are not yet written, as well as the other facts and circumstances as to why the child was removed. So you've asked if we would immediately be bringing the child back to New Hampshire, and it really would depend on what type of emergency that was. And if the emergency ceased to exist and we determined that it was still an appropriate placement with that relative out of state, that child could stay out of state, but it would still be a New Hampshire case in a New Hampshire jurisdiction.
Given the fact that we are under the old compact, and presumably the administrative rules for that have been written long ago, how would you answer the question?
Right now, we would hear from our partnering state who's supervising in the other state, and we would work with them to coordinate a plan of whether or not placement in that state was appropriate, or if they needed to come back to New Hampshire and whether or not a hearing was required or not.
Representative Cushman for a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was looking at the current statute, and there is no clause to allow jurisdiction to go to the receiving state in an emergency. It only allows them to have jurisdiction over dealing with delinquency or crimes committed in that state. So this is new language, so I would assume there are no administrative rules on this particular topic.
I wouldn't make that assumption because I don't have the compact rules in front of me. It wouldn't necessarily be expressly in the statute. This had not been an issue that had been raised either this session or the last session. We could do follow-up research and ask our compact administrator, but in my 15 years of experience with DCYF, this has not been a concern when we've had an emergency arise with a youth out of state.
This is the chairman again. So it is fair to assume if we are doing an analysis of a previous iteration of the compact, we would have to look at both law and administrative rules to get a full picture.
Of all the operational aspects, absolutely. I think that would be true for any law and rule set that we have regulating such an important topic, yes.
To follow up on that question, would it also be a fair assumption to say if we pass this version, the 2009 version, what we know is this version and what we do not know is the administrative rules that are yet to be developed because 35 states have not ratified that. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct. And we would want to be a part of that. So by entering it earlier and joining, we would be one of the states at the table to be in those discussions, where if we wait and see, we don't get a voice in those conversations. So we would like to be part of moving forward to a system that has better protections for children coming in and out of New Hampshire, and that we're able to have a voice at the table when those are being created.
Thank you very much. Representative Snow.
Well, going back to the psychologist bill that my colleague mentioned, that we looked at with the compact around psychologists being able to work in other states in emergencies. The only people who can set up rules for that compact are the people who have already joined.
Right.
And that continues. There are now 11 people that are going to be making any decisions about that, and it moves along. That's a factor we ought to keep in mind. And I think it's a justification for some of what Representative Cushman's concerns are. Some of the control of that is really out of our hands until we make the decision, not necessarily well informed to join.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Representative. Anyone else with a hand up on the screen? Seeing no one with a hand up on the screen.
Mr. Chair, Representative Cushman has her hand up.
I know that, but she's in my room. And she's on your screen. You know, this just goes to the awards that she's been given today. She is locatable. Okay, Representative Cushman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just given the conversation that we had, I don't feel comfortable having, the multiple states in an interstate compact make the rule that we maintain jurisdiction over a child if the receiving state takes that in an emergency. That I can't support this bill. I would support if there was language in there that said, they can take jurisdiction in an emergency for, as long as it takes to get the child back to either the sending state or to get in contact with the sending state and for them to come in and, take over the case.
Representative Marsh.
Yes, I would just like to point out that pursuant to Amendment 1402H that we just passed, the people out of state do not get to write the rules for the state of New Hampshire. They go through our normal rulemaking process.
Representative Marsh, the chair would ask, I am familiar with some interstate compacts, and they are written in that the local state does not have the right to write its own rules, but must abide by the joint rules. Would the amendment that reserves to New Hampshire the right to write the rules invalidate our participation in the compact?
Mr. Chair, what we did is we copied the current statute and put the references to the compact in the new compact in that section of the bill. If you have, I'll give you a page line to maybe a piece of paper because I don't have any more power than that. Yep.
Because as I said, I do know in one that I've been working on, the state cannot receive. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm sorry. Having reread the Paper Reduction Act, all 48 pages. I know in some compacts, we're not allowed to do that.
Yes, page 2, lines 15 to 16.
Of your amendment.
Of the amendment parallels the existing language in the existing RSA 170A7 and allocates to the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services shall adopt rules under Article 11 of the compact in accordance with RSA 541A. So I believe that is the correct procedure, and it parallels the existing language and statute under the existing compact.
Thank you very much. That just simply means we have to make sure that the rules in this state are written to allow that. But they're not in the bill.
Right.
Right. Anyone else? Anyone else want to go to law school this fall?
No, thank you.
I feel like I'm auditing.
It's pass fail. We are actually on the entire all 2 pages of the bill, and not just on this particular section on interstate compact. So any questions or comments on SB 162 as amended as a whole?
I'm assuming we can't make comments about the other chamber.
You can make comments about the other chamber, but in a way that does not wink, wink, name them.
So I can say, I hope we never get a bill before us with 72 parts again, because it was confusing.
Yeah.
Is that polite enough?
Actually, I would go with something more impolite, but I'll take that.
Okay.
You're here.
It's out there.
And just remember, they are the junior body, because we had a Speaker of the House in 1684, and the Senate didn't show up until much later. Just a fact. Representative Gay.
What authority do we have to tell the other body that there's a limit on how many items should be in a bill? I mean, the only one I can know is, okay, I've heard some people say this, just ITL, they won't do it anymore. But all we can do to be polite is X out sections, but it's just too hard.
Representative Weber.
We don't have any authority to tell them what to do, just as they don't have any authority to tell us what to do. But I will say that this is happening because of the COVID emergency. And believe me, there are many people in both parties that deplore the putting of bills together. And Mr. Williams will testify that when I chaired this committee, I had a number of conversations with him about not lumping things in together, no matter how non-controversial they seemed to begin with, because people, particularly people in the House, want to take a look at them separately and judge each one on their own merits. So I think that there's a huge amount of sentiment in that direction. And we can only talk to our colleagues on the other side of the wall and ask them to go along with that. But these are extraordinary times, and more often things are more broken down. But it's a concern.
The one recourse that we have is simply to ITL large bills. The difficulty in that is some very good bills die at the same time.
That's the problem.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm stuck with.
And having been widowed that way once or twice, yeah.
We could send them some.
I think where the conversation is going is both wise and be wise not to do it on open mics.
Yeah.
It's also more difficult in a larger body like this to get the kind of consensus you need.
Yeah.
to pull it together.
Any other comments on SB 162 as amended?
This is going to lead to a conference committee thing.
Well,
See, we've got amendments in there,
there could, yeah.
and that's an opportunity to make some statements about that. Assuming one of us is on the conference committee, who knows?
Representative Marsh.
Yes, I spoke to the prime sponsor this morning, and if we pass this bill with our amendment 1402H attached, he intends to concur.
Ooh.
No, it's too bad.
However, if I assume there is the theoretical possibility that there's a snarky floor amendment that pulls out something that would have to pass, and then it would be assumed that the Senate would probably not agree, and then we would go to a conference committee, and
That would be different.
all
That would be good.
crazy would break loose. Representative Weber.
But the conference committee, by our rules, is only allowed to consider matters that are in either the Senate version or the House version of the bill. So it does not open everything up to renegotiation.
My theoretical was,
Compromise in the middle, obviously, but you can't start bringing other stuff in.
my theoretical was that we would have an amendment, a hostile amendment on the floor that would strip out a section that we didn't like. And then that pared down version, let's say it's passed, the Senate does not like it, and could request a committee of conference. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, what recourse do we have? I'm not asking you to do that. Please. Any other comments on the bill before we vote on it? Seeing
Now you
none.
voted on the amendment, right?
Seeing none, the bill before us is Senate Bill 162 FN, as amended by Amendment 2021-1402H, moved by Representative Marsh, seconded by Representative Knurk. The clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Acton.
Yes.
Representative Gay.
Yes.
Representative Cushman.
No.
Representative Folsom, yes. Representative Kelsey.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
Representative Kofalt.
No.
Representative Weber.
Yes.
Representative McKay.
Yes.
Representative Snow.
Yes.
Representative Knurk.
Yes.
Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Cannon.
Yes.
Representative Nutter Upham.
Yes.
Representative Shapiro.
Yes.
Representative Woods.
Yes.
Representative Query.
Yes.
Representative Pearson.
Yes.
19-2.
19-2. Is there objection to consent?
Yes.
There is objection to consent. Representative Marsh, will you work on the committee report?
Yes.
And the two who voted in the negative may confer on which will write the minority report. And as the last time, please get that to me as soon as you can, because they're really asking for as much as we can send them, as soon as we can send it to them, because we've got a voting session coming up soon. So this ends the executive session on Senate Bill 162. And this actually ends our work for now.
Mr. Chair,
Representative,
I just we may have read about this in the paper, but there's a recent Supreme Court decision on what's called the Jane Doe case. Are you all familiar with that? It's going to have some kind of immediate effects. The Jane Doe case was one in which a case was taken to court, a patient who was taken to the emergency room at Mary Hitchcock Hospital, and this happens all around the state. It's taken to Mary Hitchcock Hospital and sat there for 17 days awaiting the opening of a hospital bed somewhere. And you know, each day is 30, the last one I heard was 30 adults and 20 children awaiting in different emergency rooms. And that's done with no probable cause hearing, which by law is required to be made available to the patient within 3 days of being detained. Current practice has been to say, well, the detention doesn't start until transferred in the state hospital or another designated receiving facility. The Supreme Court has said no. The person needs to be more immediately transferred right away to another facility, or at least to have that probable cause hearing to be held in the hospital, which makes sense. The Hospital Association and everybody else are absolutely against the idea of having probable cause hearing. They're doing a mass, I think the hospitals deserve a Medal of Honor for what they've had to put up with in their emergency rooms. Some have constructed yellow beds like Concord Hospital did and others, but it's a huge problem and they need to do it. The governor had a press conference earlier this week and he said, well, he is going to, he didn't say emergency, but he said he's going to do something right away to make sure this doesn't happen, and implied that what we need to do is expand the number of hospital beds that are available. I had a conversation just prior to all this with Lou D'Alessandro, who's the head of the Finance Committee, and he's dead set against seeing any more hospital beds. His statement was, when I started working on this, there were 3,000 people at the New Hampshire Hospital. I don't want to even make any steps back in the direction of seeing another city packed up in the hill up there. Somewhere in between, some solution is going to come down, and a lot of the decision-making is going to be, I think, geared towards this committee. So we need to start to think about how we're going to respond to what decisions are getting made around the state. I don't have the foggiest idea what the best recommendation is, but quite clearly, just expanding hospital beds is not the answer. We already knew from a previous commission that I served on, where Commissioner Chabonnet came in and said one of the big problems isn't just the front door isn't open, but also the back door.
It's the back door, yeah.
We need to really focus on easily. They've taken some steps. They took the old Philbrook Center and converted that to transitional housing, 16 beds only. The fact of the matter is, the responsibility ultimately is going to fall on the mental health system that is currently grossly underfunded and severely understaffed. And, you know, a lot of them would like to open more transitional housing. But the formula that's used by the state of New Hampshire to fund those means you agree to take on a lot of responsibility at a loss, because there's no real room to develop any revenue stream and running it under the. So I just bring it up. I mean, it's not exactly great news for everybody, but the lawsuit is come in. The governor's been on at a press conference to make an announcement. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm sure poor Murray Chabonnet, who's had to shepherd us through this crisis, is probably about to tear a hair out about The only good thing about it is poor Lori, I don't think has been in her new office up at the Brown Building since she took office, because I think she's spending all her time over at the crisis center. Maybe she'll have to introduce herself to a new office to begin to deal with this. But I really am concerned that we not get off in the wrong foot or head off in the wrong direction. And there's a lot of people here that are already being hurt badly. You have no idea, to be very, very disturbed, quite sick, and to be quarantined in an emergency room 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, or even longer in some cases, with all the other happenings that are going on, seeing people come in to drug overdoses, people coming in with severe accidents. Sometimes they're parked in the hall, sometimes they're parked in another building. There's very little treatment except to give them sit-me-down medicine. And children in particular, somebody that worked with adults and kids in the mental health system for 50 years, it's extremely painful to me to just think that is a possibility. In 2012, up until that day, and I've been in the system a long time by then, we never had anybody held over in the emergency room. We always had room to put them somewhere right away. Maybe they had to be held overnight, but they did. However, I remember the first call that went out says, we have somebody sitting at such and such a hospital. We have no beds anywhere to put them. And everybody was really upset. Nowadays, nobody's upset. You can get up to 40, 50, and nobody's really upset. Let's hope that we act on this Supreme Court rule in a responsible way and do something about this.
Representative Snow, when I was growing up in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has been recognized as one of the pioneers in building the mental health facilities in the 19th century. Then we realized that, well intended as it was, we over-incarcerated people, and I use that term deliberately. So then there was a move to shut many of the facilities, Danvers and Gardner, and all over the state of Bridgewater, all over the state of Massachusetts, because the halfway houses would be built. They weren't built. So instead of now calling these people patients, they're now called street people, or they're overflow in a hospital. And you may be particularly interested to know that when I went to visit a parishioner in the emergency room, I was grabbed by the unit head and said, Father, would you please visit a couple of people? They were in the hall, they were overflow, waiting. And I said, thinking of my encounter with you, I better take my clerical collar off first. I don't want to spook them. So sort of semi-dressed, I wound up spending several hours being an emergency counselor in an emergency room because there was nowhere to put these people. So I've been through this, and yes, and amen to everything that you have said and that you've long advocated for. And no, we are not interested, Senator D'Alessandro, in going back to the way we were, but we cannot stay where we are. Representative McKay.
As a follow-up to what Ken was talking about, Ken and I intend to activate the mental health caucus to bring attention to this for the entire legislature. We did this in the last session, and it was very successful. It's heartbreaking that all of the things that we accomplished seem to have gone to hell. So that those of you that are interested, which I think is probably everybody, the reason we're not moving too fast is to figure out where to meet. So I think maybe shortly we'll get the go-ahead to go ahead and meet. I've also got a call from NAMI, New Hampshire, which is an outstanding program, that they would like to work with us on this caucus and provide some staffing. So that.
Thank you. For the benefit of those here and listening, I thought I had adjourned this meeting, But just in case you didn't think I did, this is adjourned, and anybody who wishes to stay for this, for many of us, very important conversation may. And if you don't wish to, for any reason, you are free to go.
May I
Continue.
just say that I have sent out the links to the interstate compact and also to the side-by-side. It's in your email. Thank you.
I have another FYI.
I would just like
Representative Shapiro.